Thank you, Director Spencer. It is 6:35 p.m. Calling to order the September 2020 meeting of the Burlington Public Works Commission. The first item on the agenda is the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda. Thank you, Commissioner Barr.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Are there any comments on the motion?
Yes.
None. Let's vote. All in favor?
Chair Hogan.
Oh, yes.
We had a last minute cancellation for the appeal. The appeal was withdrawn.
Okay.
So that made tonight's agenda a little more bearable.
Sure.
So I would suggest that the motion tonight to approve the agenda should be with striking the item 7, the appeal.
Okay, noted.
Commissioner Barr, I accept the amendment.
Okay, is the seconder friendly with that amendment?
The seconder is friendly with that, so I second that.
Great, thanks. So just to be clear, we are approving the agenda as posted, exception that we're striking agenda item 7, the appeal. I guess all else would remain the same. Director Spencer, is that right? Will
Yes.
traffic calming still be agenda item number 8?
Yes.
We'll just be short on agenda item 7. All right. Any other discussion on that motion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye for myself. Commissioner Archambault, you there? All right. Any opposed? All right. The agenda passes. We're on to agenda item number 3, public forum. Mr. Goulding, how are we looking for public forum this evening?
Thank you, Chair Hogan. At this time, folks who have signed into Zoom should use the raise your hand feature to join the queue for public comment. If you have happened to call in to the phone number, please press *9 and that will alert us that you wish to speak. There is nobody signed up via email at this time, and so we'll give a moment to see if anyone signs up via Zoom or the call-in feature.
Sure, and while we're waiting, I'll note that we will have some public comments tied, public comment space in the agenda tied to individual agenda items later on. And we'll ask that if you have something to speak on it for public comment later on to not repeat that at this point. Any general comments for the open public forum?
At this time, nobody has raised their hand, and for folks watching on YouTube, we do not monitor those comments. That is a page that our friends at Channel 17 run, and we won't be monitoring those in real time. So if you wish to speak during public comment, you should join Zoom or call into the number on the agenda.
All right, we're safe at this point. Mr. Goulding, would you agree?
Yes, Chairman, it doesn't look like anybody has signed up for public comment or raised their hand.
All right, thank you. We're on to agenda item 4, the consent agenda. There are 4 items currently on the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you for that motion, Commissioner Barr. Is there a second?
I second the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Is there any discussion around that motion?
Would it be possible for you to just summarize for the general public the items that are on the consent agenda? What is happening that we're approving without any discussion further?
Yes, the agenda item as consent agenda as posted. There's 4 items there, a no parking zone in support of a new crosswalk at Locust Street at Locust Terrace, an ADA space adjacent to 65 Main Street, some ordinance changes related to 194 St. Paul Street parking to better facilitate our management of that public-private arrangement there. And lastly, item D, ordinance revisions related to the hopefully upcoming adoption of Franklin Square in the public right of way. So we have a motion, it's been seconded. Is there any other discussion around that motion? Seeing none, I'll take it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye for myself. Thank you. Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda passes. Thank you. Moving on, agenda item number 5, Winooski Avenue traffic regulatory changes. Expecting a presentation from Nicole Losch.
Good evening. Thank you. Director Spencer, would you like to say anything before I get started?
Sure, I'd be happy to kick this off. We have embarked on a robust public process through the corridor study on Winooski Avenue. This has followed a similar process with other streets around the city, including Colchester Avenue and North Avenue. And we are excited tonight to present to you 2 regulatory changes that are needed to be able to implement what the council has asked us, the city council has asked us to implement this fall. And we have a short presentation, and Nicole is going to bring that up. And we definitely welcome your Q&A, and we'll be looking for your approval for these regulatory changes.
Great. Hopefully you can see this actual slideshow now. And here we go. Yeah, thank you. So just as a quick recap, we are embarking on this project as a first rollout from the Winooski Avenue corridor study that was adopted by council back in March. And after about 1.5 years of community conversations, the vision for the corridor that was established is to provide safe, inviting, and convenient travel, to encourage alternatives to personal vehicle use, to make sure we activate the streetscape and ensure convenient access for our businesses, and to balance parking and mobility. Also ensuring that the street can still adapt to changes in the future. So we're looking at this corridor for several reasons. One, it is the primary north-south corridor through the heart of our downtown. It does not have consistent or intuitive facilities. You know, it goes from 2-way to 1-way to 4 travel lanes to 1. And with that, there is a high rate of crashes. Citywide, this corridor alone sees 16% of the bicycle crashes and 17% of the pedestrian crashes, with the majority of the crashes occurring in this downtown section between Pearl and Main. On the corridor itself, there are 6 locations that are also high crash locations reported by the state of Vermont. And with all of this, as we've wrapped up the study, council directed our department to implement this first phase of the project. They gave this direction on March 9th when we presented the corridor study itself. So the direction that council gave us was to apply new pavement markings from Pearl Street to Main Street, to provide continuous bike lanes in both directions south of Main Street, consider ways to add physical protections for people walking and biking, and to look at opportunities to improve our transit stops and pedestrian crossings. So I'll walk through just a very brief overview of the plans themselves, and we'll start with this cross section of sort of what you can expect to see on the corridor. So starting at the very northern section between Pearl Street and College Streets, this section of the corridor is the same width. It's the narrowest section of the downtown core, and all of our work is staying within the existing curb lines. So what we will see in this section is 5-foot standard painted bike lanes in both directions, 2 10-foot travel lanes, and a center turn lane that would be shared for left turns at intersections or left turns at driveways mid-block. Moving immediately south, this block from College to Main is the widest section in the downtown, and we have a little bit of extra space where we can provide a buffer for the bike lane. We are looking at some protected elements there that I will show on a next slide. But continuing with the cross sections immediately south of Main Street, this is the first section where we are asking for some regulatory changes. Currently, we have parking on the east side of South Winooski Avenue. And in this new configuration, in order to fit the bike lanes in both directions, we're proposing to remove that parking lane. And with that, we'll have a standard painted northbound lane, a southbound bike lane with a bit of a buffer from the parking lane and any car doors that may be opening there. And then the last block of this project is from King to Maple Street. And this is the next section where we're asking for some regulatory changes to create a southbound only for vehicle traffic and allowing northbound bike traffic still. And this is the current configuration that exists south of Maple Street. So we're effectively creating this again, 1 block to the north. So again, 5-foot painted bike lanes and a small buffer adjacent to the parking lane. As for the protective elements, this is just a little snapshot of the section of the corridor immediately north of Main Street. So what we're exploring here are some low mountable, they're called bus curbs. There's a little detail here. So they're 3.5 inches tall. They're mountable on each side. This should provide a much more gradual curb line than what we've seen with some of our other installations. And so this would be in place between Main and College Street. And we will have significant gaps where 2 driveways exist for the fire department itself and for the free press driveway, and sort of like a long curb cut right in the middle that's shared with the free press. We also will have a curb extension on Main Street at the northeast corner. And one other new treatment is left turn traffic calming that we'll be trying at Cherry Street. And so this is the crosswalk across Winooski Avenue itself. And what we're doing is extending a sort of mountable median just at the southern edge of the crosswalk. And what we're trying to do there is slow cars turning out of Cherry Street before they enter the travel lane or enter the crosswalk here. So this will be a new treatment for us. And then the last protected element is we do have a couple of spots where we're able to provide some planter protected medians. So this one is shown with a curved planter, but just to give a visual of sort of the general configuration and where you might expect to see this. But we are using our planters that we've already used for some of our quick build approaches. We have reviewed all this with the fire department. We've met with them twice, so they have signed off on these concepts so far. But as always, these are quick build materials, and if we need to make adjustments, we can definitely do that. So a quick summary of the traffic impacts. We know there are always concerns with these kind of projects, and is this going to work, or is this just going to cripple the traffic flow? But we have looked at this several times. So we started a first evaluation back in 2017. RSG did a circulation study that found with this configuration, operations would be similar to what we see today. They updated that evaluation in 2018 and added some additional data related to City Market and our Marketplace Garage, found similar results. And part of their highlight there is just that there is periodic queuing from Bank Street at the Marketplace Garage entrance that does occasionally spill into Winooski Ave. That's not necessarily going to change with this project, so they wanted to flag that as an existing condition that we may still see. There will be limited queuing space for left turns at the intersections and also at City Market itself. And for all of our analysis, we're really looking primarily at the PM peak. We're evaluating both AM and midday peaks as well, but the most noticeable delays are in the afternoons. So when we're looking at our reference points, that's the area that we're comparing. Most recently, we have hired Clough Harbor Associates to do some signal optimization plans so that if we need to adjust the signals to really get the most efficiency out of the corridor, what would that look like? We also have tried to compare this to RSG's analysis, and it isn't exactly a one-to-one comparison, that each model is slightly different, but to give an approximation, these are the expected delays overall at the intersection. Each approach will be a little bit different. Some will have more of a delay, others will see some improvements. But overall, we're looking at approximately an additional 15-second delay at Pearl Street, additional 12-second delay at Cherry Street, 9 seconds at Bank Street, 8 seconds at College, and 5 seconds at Main Street. So again, fairly comparable to what we see today. A pretty modest change is what we're anticipating. As for the roadway itself, we've also had some questions just about, how does this compare to the other corridors where we've done similar projects? And as a starting point, we look at the Federal Highway Administration for some guidance. They generally suggest there's a measure of safety in implementing these kind of projects up to 18,000 vehicles a day. Once you approach that threshold, we need to be a little bit more careful in our valuation. But some of the things they suggest we should see with this kind of project is a decrease in crashes, in particular broadsides and side swipes. Broadsides tend to be a little bit more high impact and prone to injuries. So that is one that we are definitely hoping to see decrease. They also acknowledge that often with roadway changes, rear endings can sometimes increase at first. So that may be a trend that we will see initially with a higher volume of rear ends, but hopefully with time that will balance out. As for traffic volumes themselves, ADT, I should say, is the average annual daily traffic. So on Winooski Avenue itself in the downtown core, the highest section, it is 15,700 cars per day approximately. And when we look at our crash history, looking at a 5-year window, there were 65 crashes in this section. And then comparing to North Avenue, our most recent similar project, the highest section is the southern area that was previously 4 lanes near the 127 intersection. And the traffic volumes out there were just over 16,000. After Ethan Allen Parkway, several cars head off into that neighborhood. And so the traffic volumes dropped down to just under 13,000. The police department just provided some updated crash data for us. They have evaluated this per quarter. And so this data is based on crashes that have occurred since 2018 when they did their last analysis. And it's showing very promising results. Overall, crashes have reduced by more than 47%, and injuries resulting from the crashes have reduced 59%. And then back in 2011, we did a similar project on Colchester Avenue. And that project, or that corridor, had roughly 15,000 vehicles per day. And we looked at a 3-year time period for crashes when we did that study. And looking at 3 years more recently, the crashes have reduced approximately 25%. So thus, again, hopefully we will see some similar trends on Winooski Ave. But there are some areas that we know we're going to have to just evaluate and monitor. We're continuing to collaborate with City Market on any potential improvements we can coordinate there, both related to their driveway itself and the Howard Center drop-off that happens just next door. We're continuing to work with Jeff Padgett and his team on any options to reduce some of the physical configurations at the Marketplace garage entrance on Bank Street, to improve the queuing there. And just in general, we'll continue to observe the operations and consider any additional changes next year. We have some opportunities to potentially add additional wayfinding for parking to reroute anyone who may be trying to use the Marketplace garage, and we'll adjust turn lanes and other turning movements as needed once we see how traffic is really operating. So just a quick schedule update. We presented this to the Transportation Energy Utilities Committee last month and also attended the Ward 47 NPA meeting at their request. We attended the Church Street Marketplace Commission this meeting. I should say also that we did provide the public feedback that we received so far in the packet. We haven't received any other phone calls or emails with public feedback since the packet went out. The commission itself, the Church Street Marketplace Commission, They do remain concerned about this project. You know, businesses are struggling quite a bit right now, and so they remain concerned just about how this is really going to impact the downtown, and is this going to be too much of a burden. So we are continuing to talk with them, make sure we're hearing their concerns, and we'll keep them updated and keep talking with them as we roll the project out. Tonight, we're here for a decision. And as for the actual schedule, we anticipate work in October. This doesn't require reconstruction or any full closures. We're expecting 1 to 2 nights to remove the markings themselves, probably 1 night to apply the long line markings with a truck, and maybe a week of spot closures as we apply the new stencils and the quick build materials. So with that, this is in your packet, but these are the recommendations that we are asking for the commission to take action on tonight. The first is, again, removing parking on the first one is the one-way street designation. So that'd be southbound from King Street to St. Paul Street now, and no parking area on the east side between Main Street and Howard Street. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. I'm happy to pull this back up if there are additional questions that we would like to go through in the presentation, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nicole. We'll go to commissioner discussion at this point. Let's start with Commissioner Archambault. There might have been a question on your microphone earlier. Confirm we've got you and see if you have any comments on this one. Still hear nothing from Commissioner Archambault. Moving on, Tiki, we'll get you back shortly and find other means. Commissioner Barr, any
No, I've
comments or
reviewed and followed this all along, and I think that all of these are acceptable. The thing I like about it is that they are quick improvements. So should anything need to be adjusted, it can be. So to me, this is a low dollar increase in safety on that street, and I've felt the better procedures, I should say, on Colchester Avenue and North Avenue, because I frequent both by bike, by car, and by walking, and this is going to be an improvement, definite improvement.
Thank you, Commissioner Barr. Commissioner Bose.
Yeah, I echo Commissioner Barr's statements. I thought this was laid out very clearly and convincingly, so I don't have any questions.
All right, thank you. Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes, I think this is a great plan. I like the reallocation of public right-of-way for the safety of all our users. One question I have on the Winooski Avenue part, kind of by the Market Street garage, what's the consideration for the bus stop there? I know I was at one meeting this was a while ago, and there was concern about either maybe moving it. I know it's a GMT discussion. I don't know where it landed, and I don't recall seeing it in the packet.
So the bus, there is a southbound bus stop just immediately north of Bank Street. Mm-hmm. And that stop will remain at least for this part of the rollout. We are using just the painted green conflict markings at all of the bus stops. So that's what we are installing there. We did meet with GMT. They are making one change to a different stop. This one, there isn't room to create a pullout for the bus at this location. We are talking with them about potentially exploring any other improvements in the future, but at least for now, the plan is to just use the green conflict markings to bring attention to that. I believe there are 2 buses that stop there. I think it's the Pine Street routes and the route that goes up Main Street.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another question. You had mentioned that during this adjustment period to the new vehicular traffic flow, there might be an increase in rear-ending incidents. Do you have a sense of the timeline? Like, how long does it take the average driver to get accustomed to these traffic patterns, to just so that we have a way to say, this is part of the adjustment period, as unfortunate as it is. And then once we go beyond that, that those any of those accidents can be considered in a different category?
It's a good question. There's not it's a hard and fast rule for that. Looking at North Avenue, which was the most recent project to compare to, rear endings did increase there initially in the first round of data that the police department provided. That was in 2017. They then dropped slightly in 2018. And by the time of this last report in 2020, they had dropped substantially. So I'd say anywhere from, it's likely that we will still see some increases in the first year, I guess is probably safe to say. And then it should slowly taper off after that.
Okay. And then just one final question. I think I remember reading a comment about the impact of residents who park maybe on Maple Street. I think the bigger question is, how do we move towards zoned residential parking, that it isn't just street? This may not be the discussion, the time for that discussion, but I know it was a big issue when we were dealing with Colchester Ave. And if we're going to continue to, reallocate this public right of way, and how do we then kind of honor the residents who don't have off-street parking in this kind of transition period as we get used to kind of different ways of moving around? So do we have a response to that, or what, how to support some of the residents?
Yeah, that's, we did get the request for resident only parking immediately south of the area that we're removing parking. So the block on South Winooski Avenue between Maple and King Street.
Mm-hmm.
So that has already been assigned to Philip Peterson, our associate engineer, who will be evaluating that. And it is a good suggestion to consider parking zone in that analysis. And so, with your feedback tonight, we'll make sure that is passed along to him if he isn't already on the call listening in. We'll make sure to consider the zone approach as we look at that one.
Okay, that's all. Thank you so much, Nicole. This is great, and I'm really looking forward to these changes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Overby.
I just wanted to make sure that we are understanding that we're changing the one way to start at King going south now instead of at Maple, and taking off the parking that would be on the east side. That would provide for the bicycle lane. Am I right? The question I had too is, you had made a mention of the project having been available for discussion at earlier planning things, and I know you mentioned the for public engagement. Was this part of the Plan BTV walk bike design for the North Winooski or the Winooski corridor? I don't know.
Yeah, so Plan BTV walk bike, I don't think gotten into this level of detail for this section of Winooski Avenue.
Okay. And regarding,
we identified Winooski as a key corridor for walking and biking, but did not suggest the type of facility.
Okay, so the details, that's fine. I just wasn't sure if we could refer to that as another place where people actually really did talk about this topic and the consequences of making this decision. But that sounds like it was not very specific enough for that to have happened at those meetings. I think my one comment is that there's going to be some contention in the area of Bank Street and the City Market entrances, and because there already is. And I think it's absolutely we need to go in this direction. But I'm just curious as to, I think just the slowing it down is going to help everybody, but there is going to probably be some interesting consequences with people that are coming south, trying to make a left into City Market, which already is a challenge, and I think is probably a source of rear ending, because people all of a sudden realize somebody's stopped in front of them to go into City Market. And then people that are going to be trying to get out of Bank Street, but they're blocked by vehicles that are waiting in line to get into the City Market. So I'm not against this. I think it's going to be an important thing, but I really think we're going to have, and the other thing of the pedestrian push the button, get across. So we're going to have a lot of people. I think it's going to slow down and it's going to change everybody's expectations of getting through there. And that's probably going to be a good thing. Everybody will slow down because it's too often you see somebody very rapidly make a passing move to get around somebody who's making a left turn into City Market. And that's terrible for the pedestrians that are trying to use the area as well. So I support this thing. I'm really glad it's happening. I look forward to seeing the first phase of it. And so I appreciate all the work you've been doing on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Overby. Commissioner Archambault, looping back around. We get a mic check.
Are you able to hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Wow. Okay. I will. I'll even go to video if that's possible.
Hey.
Wow.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties. It's the year of 2020. Technical difficulties. So I apologize if I missed some of it. I just wanted to ask. I'm hearing a lot of talk about impacts to City Market, for example, Commissioner Overby just mentioned, but I see nowhere in this packet that we're voting on anything that would change anything on that section of street. Am I reading that correctly?
That is correct. Yes. The only regulatory changes that are required are the no parking zone and one-way scenario.
Okay, so I'm presuming this when these issues come up about Bank Street or City Market, that would be for ultimately what I think I've seen projected about restriping that road to be one travel lane in each way and then a turn lane in the middle. And that is not what we're looking at here. What kind of timeline do you have for something like that?
So all of this work between Pearl Street and Maple Street, although the commission is only taking action on those two southernmost blocks, we are planning to roll this out as one project in October.
Oh, so you're effectively saying the commission does not need to approve the restriping from Pearl to Main?
Correct. Yes.
Why? Because I thought we had oversight responsibility for traffic.
For traffic regulations, yes. The configuration of travel lanes themselves are not in our ordinance. So since there's no regulation to define where the travel lanes are, there's no action for the commission to take related to that layout.
So you would not see changing from eliminating two travel lanes as qualifying as falling under our oversight of traffic regulation?
Right. The traffic regulations, as they are right now, we have the no parking zones. We have things like restricting turning movements at intersections, the direction of travel, but we don't have anything in our ordinances or regulations that define how many travel lanes exist on a roadway or where turning movements can happen.
Mm-hmm. And where do you see that authority coming from then?
It is within the directors and the city engineers' purview, is our understanding. Once the city council sets the line and grade of the road, changes within the roadway once it's built lie within the decision making with the director and the city engineer.
So the director Spencer, I'm making up a crazy scenario here, but we have Shelburne Road, for example, with 2 lanes on each side. And if one day the director decided to just cancel out a lane on each side, you're saying he has authority to do that?
It is our understanding that as long as the road remains two-way, as long as there's no change in the parking configuration on the corridor, that similar to as we did with North Avenue, where we advanced regulations related to parking along that corridor prior to the pilot up there. We got the commission's authority for that. It is my recollection that we did not seek the commission's authority to change the striping pattern along the roadway.
And is that because we are in a special situation where you have what I'll call these emergency powers, or is this an authority that's granted to you by charter, or how do you see that?
City Engineer Baldwin, do you want to respond to this?
You're still muted.
There's actually there. There you go. And I'll actually give you a little video again. So, there's a lot of things that you have to consider in developing a road and maintaining these systems, some of which historically have been described within ordinance, some are within charter authorities, within council, but absent any sort of clear delegated authority, staff has the responsibility to maintain these systems in some form or way. And so we've retained that authority simply because there is no other place it's been established. I think it's appropriate to have staff have some flexibility in decision making, but if the commission or council thinks otherwise, then obviously we work at your direction and guidance. But I don't think it's necessary for you to have to take on that responsibility. I think that's really kind of our professional responsibility. But I'm open to hear what other people think.
Okay. I mean, I'm not even talking about the merits of this particular proposal, right? I'm more talking about the authority, the oversight of that. And I would think with a change of the magnitude that's proposed for, again, I'm talking mainly between Pearl and Main, that the change to the restriping there, right? There's really not much to do pavement-wise. That there are pretty significant impacts. And I know you've talked about the public engagement process and checking in with various entities, especially along that stretch. We know that the Church Street Commission has concerns as well, and that the community might have concerns or just wish to express themselves somehow with a project of that magnitude. So I would think that an authority like the commission might be a decent place to seek approval for that section of road.
I guess I would like to offer some perspective on that. I can understand and appreciate the commission's concern or members of the commission's concern about wholesale changes that are dramatic in effect and really have a really kind of a powerful effect on how the street is used. But there's so many little nuanced things that we need to do on a daily basis that if you take that on, we would have to check in with you for so many little things. And I think we use the proper discretion to include members of the commission and council when we think that this is well beyond a daily kind of maintenance activity. And that's a gray area. So that's the way I look at it. But I just will caution you that we do need on a daily basis to make decisions on the fly. And if we were to wait month to month to make decisions like that, we would be struggling to be responsive.
So I definitely respect that. And I think none of us really have interest in getting into your own day-to-day business. You don't need a micromanager. However, I reflect upon how this commission voted on a sign down in front of the Price Chopper down at Shelburne Road, a little sign that explained those lanes that merge. Okay. If that's an appropriate level of detail, but this restriping of the road is not, I'm having trouble coming to that same place.
That in my opinion was a warning sign. I'm not sure why it necessarily had to go to that level of David, because people were demanding answers and solutions. It's not described in any sort of regulatory process, but I think the commission was interested at that time about a solution. And so we engaged in a conversation, but there was no formal adoption of any reg.
Yeah, and fair enough. I'm not trying to harp on that one issue, but I mean, all over the place, right? We approved one handicap spot or a crosswalk somewhere or a small street that eliminates parking on one side, so we do these small issues all the time. And I would not categorize this Main to Pearl restriping as a small issue akin to those.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very fair question. And honestly, it has come up with every one of these projects we've done. So this is something that, yes, we have checked in with our attorneys several times, because it is, as Norm said, it's a bit of a gray area. And so often people are surprised that technically it is not in the ordinance and under no elected or appointed decision makers authority aside from the staff level.
Well, yeah, I think it would be
ensure that there is Yeah, right. Appointed at the city engineer and the director level.
Uh-huh.
All of that said, though, we do recognize that this isn't the type of change we take lightly. There is always a very long process leading up to these changes to make sure that it is well vetted and that we do have public process before this is just a surprise change. So although it's not required, we understand the importance of bringing it in a forum like this and in all of the meetings that have come beforehand before we move forward with such a significant change.
Right.
And so actually, Nicole, you touched on what my next question would be, was what do the attorneys say, again, along my line of questioning about authority over such changes, especially since there is no precedent from what I'm hearing.
There's precedent for both North Ave and Colchester Ave. So in both of those situations, we briefed both the Transportation Energy Utilities Committee and we briefed the commission, but did not seek action from either of those bodies. So that's been the attorney's guidance to this point, is that it is a decision that lies with the director because it is not defined that it lies anywhere else.
And that's interesting because I thought I recall voting on both of those, but perhaps that was advisory, and perhaps Director Spencer has a better memory than mine. Is that your memory as well, Nicole?
Yeah, I think oftentimes when there isn't a clear regulatory need for an action, we have often presented or requested, almost an endorsement of the project, even though there isn't a regulation behind it. I think we're moving away from that a bit and trying to focus more of the decision making on the areas that each of our decision makers has clear authority over.
All right. And as much as I respect the good intentions behind those past advisory issues, it brings us to this point of a little bit of confusion over oversight, right? Where we think we maybe have more power than we really have. That's interesting. Okay, I think that those are primarily my questions. I apologize if I'm going to repeat myself, but just in terms of public engagement, which largely along that stretch, again, between Pearl and Main, is largely businesses along the stretch. Just generally, what was the pulse of the folks whose existence relies on that street?
So during the corridor study itself, I'd say we did not hear a lot directly from the businesses, aside from probably a couple of them. More recently, this morning at the Church Street Marketplace Commission, as an example, several of their members either frequently use Winooski Ave or have their businesses on that corridor. I would say in general, the businesses are, they are concerned about the impact on traffic flow. And primarily, I think their interest is in making sure that visitors to their businesses can still get to the downtown easily, and that we aren't going to create such congestion that the downtown is no longer going to be an attractive place to come and visit. So I don't think, well, I guess I'll leave it there. It's just, they're expressing their concern. We know there are things that we're going to have to continue to observe. There have been no flat out, absolutely don't do this, please, but they're expressing their concerns.
Sure. Okay, thank you for that. And I didn't even talk about my opinion this whole time, but I'm a big fan of this. I think it should have happened a long time ago, this repainting. I can recall my wife driving on that and a biker going through her back window, right? And just part of that confusion of, bikes want to crank down it just to get it out of the way, and then cars a little bit conflicted. So yeah, it's long overdue. I do think safety in the long run will be a positive thing. And it will benefit the businesses as well, as it brings down that temperament. As you see, it's kind of an angry road right now. And it'd be nice to not have more of that in today's world. So anyway, I thought I'd just leave it with my little opinion on the table there. Thank you. And I think Chair Hogan, I think that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Could I ask you to go on mute? We're picking up some feedback.
Oh, yeah.
On. I think it sounds like maybe you're signed in twice or something. All right, just a couple comments myself. I just wanted to confirm, Nicole, when you were referring to a time frame of in October, a couple nights of taking out existing markings, a night or two of work to put in the new markings. Is that expected to be like sort of the same week of activity for this portion south of Maine we're talking about, as well as between Maine and Pearl?
There will likely be probably a week in between when the markings are removed and the new markings are installed. They like to leave a little bit of time for sort of the dust and debris that accumulates from the removal to sort of wash or blow away before they come in to reapply markings. So there will be a bit of delay. It won't happen back to back. And obviously that's weather dependent. So we will apply some temporary pavement markers in the interim in the existing configuration until we get the new markings in place.
Great, thank you. I know sort of last fall we ran into a crunch and sort of ran out of time getting things striped. We've got some time booked here.
Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable still doing this in early to mid-October. Generally, the weather doesn't get cold enough until later in November. So even if it rains a bit, I still feel pretty confident that we can get this in.
Okay, thank you. And just a general comment on like some of the slow points along this corridor downtown on Bank Street and Cherry Street and so forth. I mean, I think some of that is if it's searching for parking, and we know that the marketplace garage is oversubscribed. That there's, in some respects, sort of a bigger conversation about. Well, one, as you know, we've been working with Assistant Director Paget on some changes to how that garage is managed, but also there's opportunities for sort of the marketing and communication of like, these other garages are still have spots. Other places around downtown have spots. It's not just the marketplace garage. And it'd be awesome to have maybe a couple years down the road, have some wayfinding to sort of let people know if they're coming off the highway down Main Street or coming up Shelburne Street, that like marketplace is full, turn left to go this other way, and those sort of hopefully improve the experience all around in that stretch. I will note that I did receive some public comment this afternoon from Patrick Murphy at CarShare. I shared it with the other commissioners. I will share it with staff to sort of get in the minutes as well, but they are very much in support of these changes as well. And that's all I have at the moment. So we'll open it up to public comment at this time. I see one hand raised. Mr. Goulding, do you want to give a status check here? Yep.
Yeah, we have two members of the public on Zoom who have raised their hand. We have had two members of the public reach out unable to join Zoom at this time. I did share with them the call-in number, which I've confirmed a few different ways is working. So hopefully we're able to help other folks join as needed. But in the meantime, Mr. James Kelleher is first signed up, and I can allow him to talk if you're ready.
Sure, please.
James, you're free to talk if you're available.
Yeah. Hi, I'm James at UVM, and I'm also interning with Sustainable Transportation Vermont. And I bike in Burlington, and I just say I agree with the proposal and everything. I think that road definitely needs some changes. It's hard to bike on and hard to drive on, and the repaving of the lines, I think, is the way it's laid out. I think it's a great plan to increase safety of bikers and cars, and I really support it. And then I have my friend Isaac next to me.
Yeah.
So it's going to voice some support.
I'm here as well. I bike in Burlington all the time, and I'm always looking at my back to like see if there's a car there. So it's going to be helpful to have a real bike lane. So let's support that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Isaac, can we get your last name as well for our records here?
Yeah, Isaac Padberg. I also go to UVM. Yeah.
Padberg with a P?
Padberg with a P.
Noted. Thank you.
One more.
Yeah.
One more.
This is Michael Setsky, also a UVM student and a big biker. And yeah, you know, Burlington's got some great bike lanes, and I think adding another on such a major road would be a great way to continue to have Burlington be a model for a sustainable city. So I support it 100%.
Okay, thank you. Got a 3-for-1 there.
All right.
Mr. Goulding, what are the others?
Thanks, Chair Hogan. I will unmute Sandy Bender. You're free to talk.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Sandy Bender. I'm from Local Motion, and we have been tangentially part of this process since the beginning, or at least aware of it since the beginning. And I just want to support or give our support again. This is a hugely important downtown corridor, and it is not particularly safe for vulnerable users, as the presentation pointed out. And so just urge you to approve the changes because they will make the corridor, the entire corridor, safer, more equitable, and help in many different ways to support Burlington's transportation objectives.
Thank you, Ms. Bender.
And Chair Hogan, we have one more currently signed up, and that would be Mr. Vikas Mangjapudi.
Please. Mr. Mangjapudi, if you're there, you may still be muted. And I see that prospective participant may have dropped off. Is that your view of things as well, Mr. Goulding?
I still see.
Still there, okay.
Yep, I still see them. I've asked to unmute them, but it does look like now they've dropped off. So if there are any other members of the public on Zoom, I don't think anyone's called in, but if you're on Zoom, you should hit raise your hand. If you have called in and I can't see you, please hit *9. And if anyone is watching and having any trouble, please email dpwcommunications@burlingtonvt.gov, and we'll continue to troubleshoot for you, or happy to read your comment out loud.
And Rob, are you also, if people are watching on the YouTube feed, are you able to be monitoring that forum as well in case anybody asks a question in that forum?
Yes, Director Spencer. It looks like there are 4 people watching on YouTube. We did see one comment. We reached out to that person. We do have a public comment from them for the Cambrian Rise segment, and we'll continue to monitor YouTube. If folks are commenting on there, happy to read those out loud or direct folks onto Zoom or the call-in number if we can get them. And we do have 2 more members of the public who have just raised their hand at this time. So it looks like Vikas Mangjapudi, you have raised your hand again. I'm going to promote you over to speak. You're first in line again, so you'll have the opportunity to speak at this time.
Hi, thank you. I think I got disconnected just before comment last time. I just wanted to say thank you. As someone that's been involved with the NPAs and followed the Winooski Ave corridor study from the beginning and watching everybody go through the steps, I just want to say thank you for a really robust public comment process and following this through from the beginning to the end. I'm really excited to see some of these changes actually take place. It's been fun to watch the maps unfold and look through the options and really follow the whole process. And just again, a thank you for including the public on redesigning this wonderful street.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will unmute Kai Mikkel Forley.
Okay, here I am. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. Just wanted to briefly state my support for the improvements, bicycle and pedestrian related improvements to Winooski Avenue, and just say that I support anything the city does in regards to expanding on transportation alternatives and the infrastructure necessary for same. So thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, there is nobody else signed up on Zoom, YouTube, or through email.
Thank you, Mr. Golding. All right, at that point, we'll bring it back to the commission to review. We are seeking a vote on this to approve, staff has recommended changes to the ordinance with regards to specific one-way streets designation and no parking designations. The areas south of Main Street.
Commissioner Archambault here. I'll make a motion to approve the language.
Thank you for that motion.
Commissioner Barr, second.
Thank you. The second, Commissioner Barr. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion around that motion?
I have a question and a suggestion before we vote. Can we possibly put signage out warning the public? I know there are some wonderful signs that have been put up at places where there's going to be paving, those little signs that said paving coming or something like that. And I really think that the sooner that those are somehow in place on the Winooski section between Pearl and Main, the better, because that's where people are going to, have the most challenge. So right now we should be doing something. I don't know what method, but I would really appreciate seeing something like that done, because I think it's going to smooth the process when all of a sudden overnight there's a big change in the traffic pattern. So it would be really to our benefit to help the public get that in their mind right now, that something's going to change, traffic patterns will change, things like that. So
can I ask, is that in addition to what's outlined under public engagement? Because lawn signs and mailings are already in there. So I'm just wondering if you mean something beyond that.
I will chime in too that we were planning to do both. So yeah, we did an initial mailing and we did post signs to let people know about tonight's meeting. But we do plan on doing another mailing and posting additional signs before the actual installation.
What I had in mind was actually for the people that drive through that corridor, not people that are getting email or on Facebook or something, because I really think it takes quite a few trips through for people to notice that there's something going on, and the timing of the message change. Sometimes you get the first sentence and you're past it before the second sentence comes by. But I really think that putting it there where people that drive that corridor regularly see something that says something's happening in October to change the traffic pattern here, stay alert. That's where I'm getting at, not just a notice to the public in a flyer or something.
Yep. No, we're with you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Overby. Any other discussion around the motion? All right. Seeing none, let's bring it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye for myself. Any opposed? None. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Chair Hogan, could I just make one final parting note on this, was just to put forward my confusion. And I know we're trying to work through a different environment now, but I did have significant confusion when reading the packet, thinking that we were only focusing on that one small section of the street and not looking at a painting piece. So I just wanted to put that out there, because I know that this corridor study continues, and just want for clarity, even from a public standpoint, I think it might be worth I don't know, somehow communicating what the larger scope of the project is, and even if we are going to have a narrow vote on a piece of that. So just my putting in my feedback on that.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving forward, agenda item 6, North Avenue and Cambrian Way discussion. Expecting a communication from City Engineer Baldwin.
Yes, thank you, members of the commission. Let me start by saying that, first of all, Cambrian Rise is a fairly large project, It's been many years in the making to arrive at the stage where we are, where it actually has got permitted and under construction. Certainly as a commission, you have a role that relates to the adoption of the traffic regs that support that development project, particularly the regs that relate to the control of the intersections that interface onto North Avenue, but also the parking and circulation within the streets that are being proposed to be dedicated and accepted. What is a challenge, particularly in this case, is, and it was noted at this last commission meeting, not last commission meeting, a few commission meetings ago, that the DRB process is well in advance of any commission review and approval. And so it leaves staff in a very awkward position of having to provide recommendations and technical review to the DRB that hopefully we're representing your interests to arrive at a solution that the developer can accept and the DRB can accept, and you as a governing body can, with the elements that are important to your approval. So we understand that challenge, and we've tried to do our best in that process. I would note some of the focus on this conversation has been really keyed in on North Ave and South Road and the type of traffic control decisions that were made there in terms of a traffic signal versus a roundabout. And there's been a lot of focus, particularly on my communication dating in July of 2018, where I had recommended not to install a roundabout for reasons that I described in the memo. And that comes kind of secondary to a process that really began back in 2017 when staff was beginning to review the project and developer was working closely with staff throughout a year's time before the project actually got built, or sorry, permitted. And so in that permitting process under zoning, I sent you communications that detail that approval. The approval was back in March of 2017, well before that second look at this idea of a mini roundabout. I will share with you that staff did have conversations with the developer team in 2017 prior to getting a permit. And there was specific concern and focus about all the modes that were being accommodated at the intersection. For those who aren't familiar with the project, there is a considerable amount of pedestrian activity crossing east to west. There's a considerable amount of bike traffic north-south, and there's also transit stops adjacent to the intersection. Some of the greatest challenges we have with the idea of a roundabout, there is no control for those functions and modes of transportation. And we feel, given the constrained dimension of the right-of-way, a roundabout wouldn't fit in accommodating all those uses and modes as safe as it would with a traffic signal. We, like all others, want to be open to a roundabout. Unfortunately, we want to have also a project that is going to be a success instead of a colossal failure, and then people will shut down to that consideration. So this is the struggle and the challenge we have. So the question came up in my review, why didn't I have a deeper dive analysis typical of, say, a study that was done by CCRPC for Riverside and Colchester Avenue? And the answer to that is that some of those conversations occurred in the early stages of development review, talking about what worked, what didn't work in terms of those modes, and not in my analysis. So I had provided the commission a number of documents that outlines some of the history that went with this project. And I'm hopeful that you will understand kind of the long iteration that's occurred well before my communication. I did try to provide as much of the documentation that supported my recommendation, and hopeful that I can explain at least my process of review. Tonight, we do have Eric Farrell here, who's the developer. I feel as though the last time we presented this, I was ill prepared to really present the merits of that project and what that project brings to that section of North Avenue. But I believe that Eric Farrell has done a tremendous job at really making significant improvements or proposed improvements on North Avenue to make it a very different space that can be used by many and all, and I think in a safe way. So I strongly support how that project's designed. I believe it's going to be a benefit to the community. I think there are people who feel as though Public Works is so-called stuck in a rut with roundabouts. I will share with you many, many years ago, as a staff person assigned to looking at North Ave 127, I was strongly wanting to have that be converted to a roundabout, and there wasn't political support for it. So unfortunately, we are where we are with that intersection as it stands. But I think that one would have been a success given the actual space we have to do what we could have done. But in this case, there is very limited space. And when you have very limited space and you have high volumes of traffic, I just can't see this installation being successful from at least from an operational standpoint of moving traffic, as opposed to all the other nuanced things that go with those considerations. So I've tried to give as much information as I could. I think Sovi was asking good, hard questions. I think that's important to the process. One interesting thing that I've kind of, Chapin and I have talked about is this idea of what, beyond this individual issue, how does the commission want to interface with the planning and zoning process that precedes, in many cases, the commission's considerations and decisions? And how do we want to potentially structure or restructure what we would require of developers in this traffic impact analysis, if at all? And I think that's a function of scale and size of project, because certainly we can't demand something that's unreasonable of developers when we're trying to propose and develop affordable housing. So there's a lot of things to consider. I think it's unfortunate that I couldn't dedicate more time to get you that information well in advance of this meeting to have a more robust conversation, but I'm hoping I can answer any questions you might have tonight. So at some point, I do think it would be important to acknowledge Eric Farrell and have him represent his project probably better than I could.
Thank you for that, City Engineer Baldwin. Yeah, I would think, I mean, we certainly have public comment space, but I think it would be appropriate to have Mr. Farrell respond and compliment what you just added there. Mr. Baldwin is, I think he's in a position to, Director Spencer and Mr. Golding, is that okay for your ends?
I think it's fine if you want to go to public comment, and you could get public feedback from Mr. Farrell, and then transition to other members of the public for input.
Well, okay, I guess let's hold on that and maybe circle through the 6B commissioner discussion first before we go to public comment that time. Thank you. So let's see. Yeah, let's open it up, and I think Mr. Farrell certainly want to hear your perspective. Just hold on that for a moment. Maybe we can feed you some specific questions here. So looking through our commissioners here, Commissioner Archambault, would you like to start us off there?
Yeah. I don't have a lot to say. I know there's been a bit of back and forth, and there's been a lot of materials coming in on this matter, so I was glad to read through that. Yeah, let's face it, we'd love to have more roundabouts around here. And in this case here, it looks like a mini roundabout was explored versus the larger roundabout, because apparently the Development Review Board had already approved plans that predated any consideration for a larger roundabout, which may have been a more appropriate solution. So, I'd be playing armchair general here, trying to look back and think of what happened there. Why could that board not have allowed for a transportation model like that to occur? But I'm just not as privy to their considerations, which I'm sure is more focused on the development at hand. So would I have liked a proper roundabout here? Yeah, I do think that a mini roundabout seems to be a challenge in this particular scenario, given the traffic data that's been used and reviewed by two who I consider to be professionals, right? Norm and his team, and then the person he consulted as well, who sounds like they're with the Transportation Administration. I forget exactly where that authority was. One question, and perhaps this goes to Norm, is Norm, I saw in the data it was something about for a mini roundabout, 1,300 cars or so was allowed in to that kind of configuration per, I don't know, hour or whatever it was. I just wanted to ask, like, what happens in a situation if more cars than that are allowed into that mini roundabout? So restating it, imagine we just dropped the mini roundabout there and we put in more cars than what it was anticipated. What would be the result of such a situation?
There would be a lot of, oh, there's feedback, sorry.
Oh, my bad. It's probably me. I'll mute.
It's unpredictable once you get to a certain point of saturation, how it'll perform, but likely it would be backing up traffic upstream in all legs and approaches. And then, of course, it'd be somewhat chaotic in terms of how people conduct themselves.
Yeah, okay. Honestly, that was about my only question. I think others will have questions that may stimulate some further conversation, so I'll yield at this point. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Overby, any questions or comments for us here?
I have quite a few, and I communicated some of them to City Engineer Baldwin earlier, and I don't know how to best approach responding. He sent me an email with some of those responded to, and some of them were not. So I don't know if you want to leave me to last and let some of the others get a chance to get their questions addressed, because I do have a few that I would like to, just get clarified. And I just got the email, so I have not gotten a chance to go through each of the items, and I would love to do that. So it's your call. I'm more than willing to start with my
Sure, we can come back to you. Yeah, I think in the scheme of things here, we're not seeking an action tonight. That's out of scope of this evening's conversation. So maybe just be framing questions about sort of moving us forward, or if there's questions we want to get at on the broader process, as City Engineer Baldwin was saying about this, and Commissioner Archambault was hitting on as well, about sort of the timing of processes with DRB versus Public Works Commission later on. I'll leave it at that for now, but yeah, I'm happy to swing back to you in a bit. Commissioner O'Neill, questions or comments for us?
Yeah, I guess just a couple. I think many of us agree that a roundabout probably would have been, a big roundabout would have been better. The idea of this mini roundabout, and I actually was just on North Avenue today, and doing my mom analysis and thinking, oh God, if the high school ever opens up, my kid will be riding his bike down there again. And so for me, it's the priority of how do we keep not just vehicular traffic flowing, but to be sure that the bicyclists and pedestrians and the newly minted drivers that are going to and from Burlington High School are as safe as possible. It's also a large transit route. So again, all those interactions, that they're safe and as safe as possible. And I thought I always think of, is it up in Morrisville, that little, or, oh gosh, I'm not even thinking of it.
Jeffersonville.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. That little roundabout, which I just think, oh, isn't that just darling and just absolutely, like it just really calms the traffic, and still has it flow. I don't know about, the capacity of North Avenue to handle something like that, as you were mentioning with the numbers. But kind of this goes to what City Engineer Baldwin had mentioned, like where Public Works Commission falls in this process, because we're handed something that's kind of already baked, and when in fact we have a authority to help guide some of these decisions that would, I think, better inform the flow. So I don't know where that decision, this decision tree gets interrupted so that the Public Works staff actually can have their fingerprint on things before the DRB moves them downstream to us. So I guess that's just a general comment of, I would like to see maybe ways to get anything that deals with the traffic and the public infrastructure that falls under our purview to not come to us so kind of baked or even half baked.
Chair Hogan, do you want me to respond to some of Commissioner O'Neill's concerns and questions?
Sure, please.
Okay, so first of all, I would just say that I think we all would have liked to have more real estate to be able to make a roundabout. Unfortunately, in this situation, there wasn't the real estate. In many cases, there isn't the real estate to take to do that. One of the things that could have been considered, but I think is not reasonable or feasible, could be the idea of pushing it further west, but that means you're bulging North Avenue to the west, and it's a very odd design and construction. So staff had expressed concern with the idea of a roundabout at the beginning because of all the activities that would occur. If you're familiar with this project, there is planned to be seniors in that project who are going to likely be crossing that intersection. In a roundabout, there are no controls for people to cross. And without that positive control, there is significant risk, I think, to that population. As it relates to cyclists with a constrained site and space, they are going to be very tightly placed in the mix with traffic. And that was another concern I think staff had prior to my analysis. Then you throw in there the fact that many of the people in this project that Eric's developed will need and rely on transit service, which frankly, the loading and unloading of that is at that intersection. And how would that best fit with a mini roundabout? So there was a number of things that staff considered early on that didn't get on paper in a traffic impact study by RSG, but was part of a conversation internal to staff and the development team themselves. So we were all living with certain limitations and the filter of our opinions about what is appropriate and not. But as staff, I think we believe that we are doing what is best and appropriate for the public. The question is, from your oversight as a commission, do you agree with our approach and our collective thinking when it comes to something this complex and this nuanced? It's nice to think that roundabouts will fit in every circumstance, but they truly don't. And we really want, if we're going to have them fit, we want to have them fit successfully. And I think that's been our biggest challenge. Jeffersonville is a very different place. There's probably just cars, no pedestrians, no bikes, very low. I can't imagine transit out in Jeffersonville, but so it's when we try to compare apples to apples, it's not, it's apples to oranges. And I don't know what else to add to that. I don't know if I helped you in any way and gave you answers to the questions you were concerned about, Commissioner O'Neill, but does that help?
Yes, I mean, it does help. And I know, and I have seen bike lanes in roundabouts, but I recognize that they are in really vast, wide areas.
Yep.
And North Avenue is not that. And I'd rather live in a place that has safe crossing and low conflict for cyclists and pedestrians if it doesn't have a roundabout, than have something in there that just is like shoved in because roundabouts are a good idea somewhere else. So I support the decision. I just kind of feel like there's been so much conversation about the roundabout and where the best application for it could be in Burlington, and certainly not on a high volume street. It seems, again, looking at the dimensions of the street and the flow, that I'm coming to get more comfortable with the idea that that's just not a possibility there. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
What might be helpful to staff is if the commission has ideas that you want us to pursue in terms of how we approach these things, we'd love to hear those so that for future reference, we can take an approach maybe different than what we've done to date. But I thought that we've done a pretty good job. And if you're familiar with Eric's project, you would see that he as a developer has extended himself to accommodate every ask that we provided him. And I can't imagine working with any other developer that's been as responsive and considerate to all the issues that we've asked. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. I think, it's a good reminder for all of us to be forward-looking with our feedback and suggestions here. Commissioner Bowes, any comments or questions for us?
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment to make. I mean, as somebody who's still, I see myself as still a fairly new member of the commission. I've been sort of buffeted along by, this and other sorts of debates and trying to follow them. It's been interesting for me to watch because it's very clear there are many different vested interests in, this. I am also a big fan of roundabouts and have encountered them in many different contexts. And part of, as I've been sort of looking at this question of why not a roundabout, what are the impediments, to a large degree, we're relying on different kinds of expertise or different kinds of advocacy. And to this point, I have not found anything to really take, to question the kind of expert opinions that have been laid in front of us. I'm quite convinced by the case that has been made around the lack of feasibility in terms of space. Those kinds of spatial constraints are really hard to simply wish away. And nothing that I've kind of seen in I've seen a lot of studies and evaluations of other contexts. Well, that's fine, but this is not that. And I think, I guess I've encountered that in a lot of different contexts in Burlington, where there's well, you're able to do this in this other place, and why can't we do it here? Well, there's all sorts of reasons that in this particular location that may not necessarily make sense. And continually simply repeating the same kinds of, well, why isn't this happening? At some point, we either say we accept this expert opinion or we don't. But there has to be some kind of basis on which we say this doesn't make sense. To my mind, at least, I have not been so compelled to reject that kind of that opinion. So at some point, I do think that if we are to question the kind of take on this particular location, I'm all for that. And if that's a convincing critique, then I'm willing to entertain that. To my mind, to this point, I haven't seen that. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bose. Commissioner Barr.
Thank you. I don't have any questions either, and I agree with many of my peer commissioners on their comments. I will share though that I've had much experience with roundabouts, both in Europe and living there, in larger cities, built up areas. I frequent Jeffersonville a lot because we have a camp in the Northeast Kingdom that I go to, so I'm always on Route 15, cutting up through there. And I also bike through the Old North End, and there's a roundabout. I want to say it's on Pitkin or Blodgett Street, I think. So I know that there's an application for roundabouts in many places. One of the challenges I think that we have to consider is if a certain area, the circulation is going to be at conflict between pedestrians, cyclists, and cars, we really have to take a hard look at whether a roundabout is the right answer for there. Because in living in Europe, I will say that when I went walking or biking around some of the roundabouts, they were clearly put in areas where the intent of the roundabout was to increase traffic flow. And trying to cross, I felt like Frogger. There is no light to stop a car, so you really are at the risk of hoping they see you. Yet in a neighborhood like the Old North End, there's very little traffic, and a roundabout it really decreases the conflict of that intersection. Jeffersonville is the same thing. That's primarily trucks. If you have gone up there, you'll see that the little granite curbings have a lot of black mark on them, and that's because 18-wheelers can't make it around that without going over the island. So, I mean, everything has its gives and takes. But I think there's several places in the Burlington area that merit a roundabout, and I don't need to necessarily nominate them all right now, but I can share some places where I think that would be a great place. However, when you start taking away houses or potentially expanding it to the point where the right of way has gone into public or private domain, that becomes some of a challenge in some cases. I would say that there's been a conversation about putting a roundabout at the bottom of Colchester Avenue at the bridge. And I'm an advocate of keeping the historic buildings there, like Remember Baker's Trading Post, which is now a Domino's Pizza. And there's another house there that might have to go if that was turned into a roundabout, as I understand it. So there's an application. I guess I'll finish with there's applications where it fits, but wherever there's conflict, I don't think I would feel safe going through a roundabout in a bike when there's a peak traffic flow, because the cars are not going to be looking for me. They're going to be looking, how quick can I get through this roundabout? And that's my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Barr. Commissioner Overby.
Okay, great. Thank you. My questions actually relate more specifically to my confusion about how there was traffic data provided to two different experts, and the recommendations are completely opposite. And my concern was that we were only seeing originally and being told about the city engineer Baldwin's assessment and analysis and recommendation, and not the assessment of a noted roundabout expert, Clive Sawyer's, and why they were both based on the exact same data. And that's really where I'm coming from on this particular issue. I think we can have a discussion about roundabouts merits generally, and I think my sense from hearing the other commissioners' comments and frankly also from City Engineer Baldwin is that there's just a difference of understanding of the way the roundabout actually works. So let me just first focus on my original concern, which is the kind of questions I've been asking both Tony Reddington, who has provided information because he actually did facilitate having the data, the same data that I understand City Engineer Baldwin used to assess the feasibility of a mini roundabout, and he came out with the conclusion that there should be a mini roundabout at the south road, and there should be just emergency entrance at the north road. Just some of the questions I had asked, and I tried to make sure that I get these ahead of time to whoever's going to be asked to answer them, so that it's not like a surprise and they can actually be prepared. I guess my first question, and one that I didn't, that sort of related to the questions that I asked in an email form. City Engineer Baldwin, how did you actually incorporate the recommendation of the Sawyer analysis, compared to yours? Or was it just that it was, maybe I'm understanding from your statement today that it was just sort of too late, there was already a decision to be made, DRB had already approved a signalized thing, so it was maybe just too late, and that maybe that's the answer, that it was too late to be considered as part of your recommendation?
So it wasn't too late. I think, and I don't remember precisely when, I guess, Clive Sawyer provided, or Tony provided, that his response to my communication. My sense is that happened sometime shortly after my communication was circulated, which, from my perspective, I've seen all too often blind advocacy for things and pushing us in a direction of advocacy to agree when, in fact, there is some play within interpretations of how these numbers are developed and applied and modeled. And so, I have to have comfort in the decision, because ultimately I'm responsible for the decision. And I can hear all the noise in the background, and I try to listen as much as I can, but I have to have kind of silence in my own opinions to really kind of draw a conclusion. As an example, Mark Smith may had drawn a conclusion. If I were to accept what everyone tells me, I wouldn't have spent the time and effort to do the analysis that I had done myself in a different way. So whether it be Mark Smith or Clive Sawyer, I personally had to have comfort that I would be, whatever I was proposing or deciding, I'd be in a position to defend. And I still believe I'm in a position to defend what I've done and the work I've done and the quality of work I've done. Though I've seen the communications about how people have opinions about my decision, I can't let that detract me from doing my job and doing the best job I can. So I hope that explains kind of my thinking and how I saw or had interpreted all these influences, but I really need to have kind of my own understanding of the circumstance and do my own research. And frankly, I had done quite a bit of research in terms of who should I use as a solid reference to do the analysis. And you see in my study, I'd taken two approaches to arrive at the same answer, independent. And that was, one was to use the NCRP, whatever. It's basically the Traffic Research Board's tables that does the quick analysis of whether or not a mini roundabout on a certain circumstance has a capacity based on side street traffic entry and truck traffic and all those other things drawn from that reference table. And then the other one was the Federal Highways analysis tool that I had reached out to the Federal Highway research person, who's the person in Federal Highway, to use this capacity analysis model. And you can see in the complexity of kind of my analysis that I had basically tracked what the volume of traffic would be entering that intersection at a series of years into the future. Because what's important to this conversation is, whether it be Eric Farrell's investment or the city's investment, is this thing going to function and operate in a horizon window of time worthy of the investment? And will it function safely and properly? So that's why I looked at like a 20-year cycle. Is you're putting this kind of money into a development project, you better make sure that it's not a boondoggle 2 years into it being putting into service and reach beyond capacity And then where do I stand in terms of credibility? So maybe I am too conservative in terms of my views of servicing that traffic, but I'd rather be conservative than have it be a colossal failure and a waste of resource. So that's, I think, how I can explain best the difference between what I've done and maybe Clive Sawyer or even Mark Smith.
So your interpretation of the Clive Sawyer analysis is that he really is not providing a reasonable. I mean that he really should be discounted. It's not. You don't believe that as a good analysis, perhaps?
No. I don't know, and I don't have a means to drill down to all the assumptions that he's providing that ends up with an output. In my communication, I tried to provide every detail of that decision making to be transparent. And so when you rely on some piece of information that's an output without transparency of how it was arrived and what the assumptions are, that's very dangerous for me. I'd much rather rely on my own confidence of what I've relied on than to rely on just blindly what people are providing me.
But, I mean, this is what's so confusing to me, is that the information provided by the Clive Sawyer data is the same data that you used and the same assumptions, everything about it. But his recommendation is it would make sense and it could handle all that there. And so I believe in roundabouts because I think they do work, and they work for seniors getting across the street, and they work for, they work because they slow people down and they have a certain design. So my bias is obvious, but I'm not worried about my bias here. I'm worried about the fact that you want to be able to support your decision based on the data. And you have 2 or 3 different experts. I guess you have the Federal Highway Administration person who provided you with an analysis, and we have. So in my concern is that we don't really have a consensus that the data actually will support a signalized or a roundabout. And based on that, what's happening is it appears is that, and again, I think your history of the whole DRB process and where that started, it sort of answers the question that you were reluctant right from the get-go to use a roundabout because there was concern there would be seniors living there, and your perception that it's dangerous for seniors to use a roundabout as a way to cross the street, which got us going to this point. So I just, my concern is that I do not see that the data that you used support your recommendation. And I've been struggling to get the numbers understanding, and I've asked a lot of questions of you about that, and I still will continue to try to learn that, because the first roundabout in Burlington will always be a little bit more challenging, and it will feel uncomfortable. And I get that. I really get that. And I sense that's what's happening here. But we really can't explain disposing of the Clive Sawyer recommendation for its safety and its, and I'm not going to go into why roundabouts are great. They do, but in fact, the traffic and people and bicycles and cars are not well managed by a signalized cycling light that actually people sit there when there is a red light and there's nobody needing to walk across or nobody needing to drive from a side road. It's very inefficient. It just doesn't make sense environmentally. It's an old technology at this point.
Well,
that's my philosophy, but I want to support that by.
I strongly disagree with you. I strongly disagree with you on that. And I just would say that roundabouts have a useful purpose, and that is to move traffic, and they can function and move traffic in a very efficient way and probably could service more traffic than a traffic signal. But it is, and it reduces side impact accidents, the severity of those vehicle accidents. But I don't think it does much for any of those other modes of transportation. And I think it's a challenge to argue that point with people.
Right, and I think part of it is, again, we can have a discussion about roundabouts, because the engineering, the reason that for me roundabouts work for seniors getting across the street is that there's engineered to separate the perception of a pedestrian from the having to search for a vehicle. And so a car that is coming down North Ave to a roundabout is absolutely having to stop for a pedestrian, look for that before they're actually having to negotiate entering the circle and then looking for vehicles. So the fact of separation of that, because a human is going to always lose when there's a car, when the cars are looking for other cars. And that's sort of, I don't want to really, that's not really my point here in this discussion.
Yep.
I really want us, I like your proposal that we discuss when the Public Works Commission gets involved in this, because it does feel a little bit like it's sort of, we get told it's too late to address your concerns because it's already been decided at the DRB level. And I appreciate your opening that as an opportunity, but I do not feel like in this case, there has been an appropriate support for the data that show, and particularly by an expert, an international expert in roundabouts, and you've chosen to use a recommendation by somebody else who may not have that level of expertise in roundabouts.
And I would argue that I am in the United States, Federal Highway is the administration that substantiates the standards of practice that we apply. And when we talk about someone with a foreign background and a different culture, that doesn't carry as much weight to me as someone from Federal Highway.
That says it all.
It just doesn't.
That says it all. I'm sorry to hear that.
Look, I mean, if there's...
I think the one thing that I would have asked is that, and is that when the DRB actually comes to their conclusion and has made a negotiated agreement to use a signalized intersection, are you bound to not go further and gather additional data and incorporate it into the decision, or is that, do you feel like you're able to actually assess new information? Or are we bound, is the Public Works Commission bound by whatever the DRB has already decided and signed on the dotted line?
Well, it's interesting thing. So this is where it becomes into a legal issue, is if a developer or whoever's doing a project is relying on decisions by city officials, whether it be myself or the DRB, they can't invest time and money building something and then have us second guess that decision. They've already spent time and money. And so that at the front end of this, we have to find agreement about how we approach these issues so that we avoid that problem, whether it be at this level at the commission or DRB, but ultimately the public that we're serving, both developers and projects, need to have clarity about what's expected, needed, and required. And so that's what I'm trying to get at here is, I have my approach, you have your opinions. I'm trying to find a common understanding of what's expected of me and my staff and what is expected and needed and required of developers so that we can, at the end of the day, we all can be proud of whatever is being approved and built and developed. And I guess there is always opportunity to learn and to change and to do things differently. But I really think we did our best in this case. And I still think that it's the right solution for the circumstance. If I didn't think that, I think I would swallow hard and try to find a way to change that, but not at the expense of the developer.
Yeah, and I think I understand that it really has to be a change of perspective by the Department of Public Works, because the leadership is going to have to happen there. And right now, your interests are more conservative than maybe other public works departments in other communities. And I do have familiarity with other ones as well. And Ohio University and the Public Works Department in Athens, they've been going gangbusters with roundabouts, and they do have to deal with just as many challenges of space. But when there's a decision that it's going to be better for the community, then there's more of a willingness to go through the pain. And it doesn't happen so late in the process for that it would have happened 3-4 years ago, which is why I was concerned in May when I said, well, why wasn't this discussed before there was even a building, there was even a shovel of dirt dug. So I appreciate your answering all my questions. You've done a lot of work to get documents for me. I'm going to read through them. I right now do not feel like your recommendation for a signalized intersection is a good idea, and I don't feel like it's based on adequate documentation, particularly when there's a conflict with the very same traffic projections. And I didn't see any projections, and I asked you about this about pedestrians. There's no projections of how much additional pedestrian traffic, bicycle traffic will be using that intersection. So I guess we just disagree on how we go forward, and I just don't feel confident that we have the best decision based on the information we have. But we will have to live with that decision, and then it can be changed in the future when we finally realize what we've done. As Public Works is always good at doing. If you make a mistake, you find something to do it differently, and that's how it works.
So I don't actually have the data in hand. It's in the traffic impact study that was done by the development team's designer. And I can share with you the traffic impact study that has all that detailed information, all the backup and support.
Yeah,
I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, you've provided in your report, you provided the basis of the numbers and the turning numbers and all that. And I know Clive Thor's provided his, and those are the two numbers that
right, but there's a traffic impact
study. GB data.
But there is a traffic impact study that was issued as part of the DRB process that I think dates 12-something-17. So I don't know if you've seen that.
I'm assuming that your recommendations, and as I understand it, the Clive Thor ones were based on the same data that was presented to the DRB.
Yes, but my point is you're asking questions about other things. And the analysis I provided only focused on operational performance for vehicles within that roundabout.
Oh, I see you're saying about the pedestrians and the bicyclists.
Right, correct.
Yeah. Okay, no, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that.
I can send that to you.
I right now don't have any other, I don't want to run us on here. The one question I did have is what your thoughts were on the recommendation about really focusing on the South Street and keeping the North Street, the north entrance for emergency vehicles only. Was that recommendation at all sounded a good idea, or does it sound like a bad idea?
I think the more opportunities for access beyond just one point is a benefit. And okay. I think the idea that he's proposed is, I think, creates more of a challenge in a concentrated way at an intersection that's already maybe taxed.
Okay, well, I think I've got most of my questions. I probably have some hidden in my stack of questions, but thank you for making an effort. And I think we just will agree to disagree on this decision.
Well, I remain open to understanding what approach the commission would want me to take in these matters, and my team, not just myself, because I certainly don't represent every review that goes to the city. I have staff that participates in that conversation, but I certainly, in a leadership role, can influence that through these conversations.
And my only recommendation is to please, when there are situations where there is a large development having an impact on an intersection, that the roundabout be early on assessed using the software that was actually recommended by Tony Reddington, which is not what was used apparently to analyze it. Apparently they did use it at the Colchester Barrett site, but something that actually is more appropriate to the balancing of the needs of the roundabout versus so that would be my suggestion. That would be very helpful to help make sure that a developer doesn't get this kind of discussion happening late in the process. And it's pretty much up front, right from the get-go. The preference is for a roundabout over a signalized intersection. That would be my hope.
So I would just say that we need to talk seriously about how we change the development review process and what the city would expect in ordinance to require of a developer, because in many cases, we don't have the authority to demand that high level of review and analysis. And it has to be a triggered function of how big the project is. And so I think that's something that we need to sort out and consider.
So that could be a city council discussion and decision.
Well, I think that it would be a more of a conversation with technical staff, this commission, and probably the DRB.
Right. But
And
I
legal.
think this is a very productive discussion as it relates to what is the development review process. And if the commission would like to review big development projects that may change the signalization or the level of infrastructure at an intersection, we can have that discussion, and that would require an ordinance change to kind of give the commission that authority.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Overby. With that, let's open up for public comment. Mr. Goulding, can we do a check of public comment? I see Mr. Farrell is still on the line. So let Mr. Farrell speak, and any other interested members.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Hello.
Well, this has been a very interesting conversation to listen to. I thought it was a very thoughtful discussion, and we did our best to work with an accepted, professionally accepted in RSG, traffic engineer, to design the intersection, because that's way above my pay grade, and worked closely with Public Works back in 2017. I was open. I told Tony Reddington that I was open to reconsideration of a roundabout if that was the appropriate geometry, and and let's all take a look at it. And we did that in 2018, and RSG looked at it again. Norm did what he did, and I think the conclusion was that it wasn't appropriate. Again, that's above my pay grade. I have to trust the people who are experts at it. Since that time, and that 2 years has passed, we've built a couple of buildings right up snug to the intersection, as was permitted. But I will say this too, though, we are absolutely committed to public transportation, bike traffic safety. We put enormous resources into providing opportunities for bikers. We have a ton of bikers that live in our buildings, and we've also promoted a redesign of North Avenue that provides parking on the west side of the road to calm traffic and benefit the residents that live across the street, and trying to bring Cambrian Rise and those residents together in a community, so that section of North Avenue lives like a neighborhood street, not like an arterial road that people just buzz through. So I think we're going to be successful at that. And I agree with whoever made the comments that, if there's a different process in the DRB process that needs to be undertaken, I think that makes some sense. But, for our particular case, I at the end of the day, I think that the intersection we're building is the right one. But I'm trusting the people that worked with us in Public Works in that regard. So we obviously want it to work well for our residents and for the community. I live farther out on North Avenue. I was born and raised in Burlington, so I may be a developer, but I love the community that I live in. So I don't want to do anything that's not in the best interest of our community as well. So I appreciate the conversation, and we're always open to trying to do what we do better. And I will tell you that your DPW staff is very professional. We spend enormous amounts of time with them over the last year and a half, and we appreciate the consideration that they gave us. And we were trying to remain open-minded about everything that we're doing at Cambrian Rise. And so we hope the outcome is beneficial to the community.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Farrell. Mr. Golding, are we looking for other potential participants here in public comment?
Hi, Chair Hogan. Nobody is currently signed up on through email or on Zoom. For folks on Zoom, you can hit the raise your hand button on the bottom toolbar. If you happen to be called in, you can dial *9. I do have a public comment from a member of the public who would like me to read it, if that's favorable to the chair.
Please.
This comes from Lee Terhune. Public Works Commissioners, please review your decision to put a stoplight at Cambrian Rise. Why does old thinking prevail? I travel on North Ave daily, and a roundabout there would be preferred. I attended the Sawyer Symposium at UVM and recall a few DPW employees sitting against the wall looking bored and resistant, arms crossed in front of chest. They were being provided with free, state-of-the-art continuing education, and they left early before the working design groups interacted directly with Mr. Sawyers. I was in a small working group with now Commissioner Overby. I recall that she was eager to learn, asking questions, offering ideas, and engaging with Mr. Sawyers on his level. I was impressed. Smart woman she is. Now, Public Works Commission has benefit of her knowledge and forward-thinking knowledge about roundabouts, which DPW staff blew off by acting bored and cutting out early. I have family in Colorado where roundabouts are the rule. Big ones, small ones, they are everywhere, and it is delightful to travel smoothly through safe intersections with unobstructed views. A progressive city like Burlington, wishing to attract young families and future-oriented businesses, has no place for stuck in a rut DPW. I have hope that the Public Works Commission will pull the DPW forward and advance planning for a roundabout at Cambrian Rise. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I don't see any other members of the public.
Okay, thanks for communicating that to us. All right, let's bring it back. Actually, in fact, since there is no action requested of us at this time, I just check with fellow commissioners. Are there any sort of parting thoughts on this item before we move forward? All right, I guess seeing none, I will close out agenda item 6. I thank you all for a spirited and I hope a productive conversation. I expect, yeah, maybe there'll be some takeaways in terms of the processes here, but I appreciate all of the energy and feedback that's provided here. All right, so with that, we'll close out item number 6 and move forward. Item number 7 is stricken from our modified agenda, and we're on item 8, traffic calming program revisions. We're looking for a communication from Nicole Losch.
Hello again.
Hello again.
Director Spencer, did you want to say anything before I get started on this one?
It's been 20 years. We've made a lot of progress with the traffic calming program over that time, and I'm pleased with what we've done. That said, we have struggled to respond to requests in a timely fashion. And what we're trying to do here is develop a better, more responsive program looking into the future. I've been really pleased with what staff has developed. There are some significant changes. We're not asking for approval tonight. The traffic calming program is a staff driven policy. But that said, we want to make sure we get your input as we want to make sure that the program generally framed is responsive to the community's needs and concerns. So with that, Nicole Losch has a short presentation that highlights some of the key changes of the proposed program.
Thank you. So I do have a very short presentation. I included the draft update of the traffic calming manual itself and a quick overview of the new program, but let me jump into this presentation for you. This is also available on our website so that the community who may be interested in traffic calming can get an understanding of particularly how this differs from our current program. So as Chapin said, we established our traffic calming program and neighborhood enhancement program in the late 90s, did some updates in the early 2000s, but have not updated it since then. So we have struggled to move requests through in a timely fashion. So that was one of our motivations for pursuing this. But some of the other reasons are that, we do require a neighborhood petition upfront right now. And basically we ask each neighborhood to circulate some kind of document to their neighbors, looking for 1/3 of them to show support, to have a conversation about traffic calming before we go in and start working with the neighborhood. This does create some inequities for neighborhoods and residents that may not have the time or the language or just other barriers to just navigate that petition process. So we've removed the petition so that anyone who has a concern about traffic can just contact us and we'll start the evaluation. Again, the requests right now are taking many years to get in, and we do progress through a first in, first out model, which has just led to a really significant backlog of projects. What we've shifted to is using really data to drive our decisions. And related to that, we've also removed the neighborhood poll, which is typically used at the very end of the traffic calming process that we undergo with each neighborhood. That's often why these projects sometimes take a while to finish, because we want to make sure there's good buy-in from the neighborhood before we actually get to the poll process. Under the old program, this was a mailed letter we sent to the neighborhood, and at that point we asked for 2/3 of the neighborhood to support whatever proposal we were recommending. And if we couldn't get that support, then we ended the process and they would go back to the bottom of the list if they wanted to restart the whole process again. So, sometimes there's a lot of back and forth working with the neighborhood trying to find a design that really works for them. So we've decided to remove that process. Again, really relying on data to first inform whether there's a traffic problem on the street that we need to address. And if so, then also ensuring that we are able to identify the tools to improve traffic safety on their streets, and rather than relying on a poll process to make that decision. There will still be neighborhood engagement along the way. We won't do this in a vacuum. It's, again, just removing the poll itself. So some of the other changes that people can expect, again, data-driven. So what we're going to look at are traffic speeds, crash rates, and truck volumes. So the traffic calming manual itself, there is a flow chart and a guide that indicates what those thresholds are. And if a street does then meet the thresholds, and we'll start working on a design, one of the other changes is that we will start trying to match up our planning documents, our comprehensive plans, both the walk bike plan and our transportation plan, which both identify corridors where we may want to have travel speeds less than the posted speed limit. And so what we're trying to do now with this program is reference those manuals, and then if there's a design speed less than 25 miles an hour, we'll advance a traffic calming strategy to try to achieve that design speed. With all of this, we're intending to really prioritize traffic safety. Like, that's really at the forefront of these changes. We want to make sure that a street that really has a traffic safety issue doesn't have to wait, 6 years for us to begin working with them and to see some real change on the street. So we'll be able to expedite the whole process. It does streamline the process for the community at the same time, and trying to, again, make this equitable for every neighborhood. And we're really focusing on redesigning streets. We used to have a neighborhood enhancement component, which really just allowed kind of anybody that had a concern related to traffic on their street to get into the program, and we'd talk through some ways to re-engineer their street. We've removed the neighborhood enhancement process now, though, and we have instead listed the various resources that we often hear of interest to neighborhoods that have concerns with traffic on their street. It may be lighting, sidewalks are missing, street trees that they want planted or other beautification. And so we're providing a list of these other resources that don't have to follow this traffic calming process. They can just pursue those separately. So this is a very brief guide of kind of how someone may expect to navigate the process now. Again, anyone can contact us with concerns about traffic on their street. They can use SeeClickFix. They could contact us directly. We'll then review available data. Sometimes if traffic data isn't available immediately, there will be a bit of a delay just while we collect that initial data. If it meets the thresholds, we'll develop an improvement plan based on the characteristics of that individual street. We'll have some community engagement to try to see if we need to adjust anything or if the concepts that we've come up with, they're very concerned about. But it's not going to require the neighborhood vote. And again, if the street at the beginning of the process doesn't meet the thresholds, then we'll share this resource list of the other neighborhood enhancements that they can pursue separately. So here's the link to the new program guide online. This presentation is also available there, and our general DPW planning at burlingtonvt.gov email address if anyone wanted to chat about particular traffic calming. I should also mention that we do have a queue of streets still in the list for traffic calming. We haven't followed up with them yet in terms of where they may fall in this new program. We want to take a really close look at the data that we've collected and apply before and just be really confident in that data before we follow up with them. So we're taking one last look at the data before we get back to each of those streets, but we will do some direct outreach to them to follow up with next steps. So with that, I will stop sharing again. As always, happy to pull this back up if we'd like to reference anything, but otherwise, just happy to entertain any comments or questions.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Overby, get us started here.
Sometimes slow getting unmuted. I think this is a great piece of work, and I particularly like the fact that you're explaining that the traffic calming items that are in this, that are options as part of traffic calming, are self-enforcing, which means they do not require the police or somebody to enforce them, whereas some of the other kinds of things that are mentioned in here, where there are things that would require, the speed limit signs or some other things. And I think it's just really important that people understand that these are things that you're trying to do that maybe will actually have some impact without having to have a police officer, in place to do something. So I really was impressed that was, what you're explaining what traffic calming is, and that it's not speed bumps and it's not some other kinds of things that are, or stop signs that people otherwise might think of. So I think it's really well done, and I really appreciate that you put in some statistics about how speed so much impacts the outcome if there's a collision between a car and a human or a bicycle, or frankly even a bicycle and a human, because that happens too. So I think it's a great piece of work. I really appreciate your putting this out, and I think it's a much better way than all the rigmarole that was that was required for people to actually get that, because people would always feel like, well, I'm just getting the runaround, I got to do this and that. And so I really feel like it's very structured, like the tactical urbanism techniques. It's a way for people to actually see they're going to be able to maybe get some results about things that are important as far as cutting back. And I really, my real philosophy is speed is really the issue. We have to slow everything down, whether it's by a roundabout where it's quieted down so that you've got less to be distracted by, or if it's some of these other things which are in your brochure. So some of these techniques are different, but I think that it's great that this is put together this way, and I hope that it's well publicized when it's finally approved. So thank you very much for the excellent work on that. I really like it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Commissioner O'Neill.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. I agree with Commissioner Overby on the target design speed, where the infrastructure will help slow down as opposed to just a speed limit sign. You have this prioritization of traffic calming and traffic safety. I guess I want to be sure that that it isn't just vehicular traffic, that we're also looking at the bicycle and pedestrian traffic, because I know how different roads are utilized differently by our different users. And I know this is geared more towards cars and slowing down the cars to keep the bicycles and pedestrians safe. But I just want to make sure that we kind of keep bike and ped safe really at the priority. A question I have about your kind of prioritization. I know you said you have some already in the queue, and I like that the petition process has been removed. I think we can move towards kind of more equitable distribution of the resources across the city. I think what tends to happen, and it's not just with public works, but the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and in our city, the squeaky wheel tends to be white and privileged. And when we're looking at public infrastructure, I really want to make sure that as the commission and as the public works staff, and I know this is near and dear to you, is that we are looking in areas where many people do not have access to a vehicle. We're looking in the Old North End. We're looking for these corridors and linkages so that the equity piece is part of our priority. So other than that, I think this document looks great. Thank you for your work on it.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Bose, comments, questions for us?
Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to echo the comments of the previous commissioners. I really enjoyed reading the report, and I was particularly pleased to see the changes in the neighborhood petition, because I do think that that's such a high burden, especially for those who, you know, as Commissioner O'Neill, Vivanco just pointed out, that there's all kinds of differential access to your neighbors, and not just around language, but class and many other sorts of things, race, obviously. So I was really pleased to see that. I did have a quick question. You know, you referenced a couple times in the document, but also you mentioned the sort of the backlog and queue that is sort of historically remaining to you. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, given this new data-driven kind of focus on the, you know, where the real pressure points are, how, you know, do you have sort of plans on how you're going to address that backlog, given this sort of new focus? Thanks.
It is an excellent question, and we have not fully fleshed that out yet. So, excuse me. Yeah, honestly, I could take a guess at how we will approach this, but I think it's an area that we probably need to have more of a conversation within our department, once we see the full analysis of the streets that are in the queue, to help us understand how will work through the backlog. I'm hopeful that since we have I'd say a pretty good foundation for the transportation budget that will help us advance some of these projects. And we do have a new strategy with our quick build program over the last couple of years. So I think that even addressing the backlog and being creative in the ways that we can still get some interim improvements, maybe while we're waiting for full construction, that I don't think we'll be in a position where we will still have to have a street wait for years before they'll see any improvements, if they do indeed meet the traffic calming threshold.
I mean, the one sort of additional comment I guess I would make to Peggy's earlier comment about the squeaky wheel, I went and I was kind of like trying to figure out, okay, where are all of these streets, and just sort of gaming out why they might have made these kinds of requests. And I guess I would just urge you to, I found it very compelling, the case that you made here. Let's base this on need rather than volume of request rather than demand. And I think just clear messaging as to how you proceed makes a very strong equity case for this new approach. So I just applaud you on that as well. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Bose. Commissioner Barr.
Thanks, Chair Hogan. We're all saying echo previous commissioners' comments, and I think that's the case for me as well. I loved the term tactical urbanism. I remember seeing several presentations involving tactical urbanism, and I think that this is a better direction for us to go in for some quick builds and things like that to help traffic calming. I also want to say that I'm very happy that that we've reduced the neighborhood petition challenge, because I live in a neighborhood, for instance, that there's a lot of non-resident or absentee landlords and one-year renters that it's very difficult to gain concurrence for things. And I also live on a street that happens to be a pass-through between what I call the old East End to South Burlington. So there's a lot of cars that go pretty fast down through here. And so DPW has done a great job putting in some traffic calming and some differential paint on the ground, let's call it, to try and help slow it. So we'll see how that works. But I applaud you with this. This is fantastic. I recall some challenges at the NPAs with people feeling like nothing will ever get done because they keep asking for it. And this, I think, is really a tool to move forward for them. So I can't wait to keep it going.
Thank you, Commissioner Barr. Commissioner Archambault.
Greetings, thank you. Just one question, echoing everyone else's comments. There's a note in here about there's a list of projects with active traffic calming requests, but excluded the ones that are currently in design. What are the ones that are currently in design?
We are wrapping up a project on Ward Street that started construction last year, but has one element still to be installed. And we are in the midst of conversations with Birchcliff Parkway.
Okay, so those two are the ones actively under design right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. That is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Archambault. Just a couple comments myself here. I was glad to hear the mention of interim solutions and getting in this data-driven approach. Like, all right, if you identify a need here, that there's sort of slotted in the priority for construction 2 years from now or whatever it is, then maybe we could put out some traffic barrels now and lean on our sort of quick build toolkit. Also wondering sort of how this relates to what we currently have in our sort of under emergency designation of local traffic only streets. Could you comment on sort of transition out of our current local traffic restricted streets into a plan like this, or are there any places where you're seeing particular successes or challenges there that might inform I guess what we're doing with this calming program going forward?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So the streets that are currently designated as local traffic only, related to the pandemic, those are planned to be removed in October before winter arrives, because those signs will probably not last. We have not done any real direct data collection on those streets, just due to our capacity and restrictions with other projects.
Sure.
So we're really relying on kind of somewhat anecdotal data from the streets themselves. Interestingly, Birchcliff Parkway is one of the streets that has that designation. And so it's in the conversations with that neighborhood in particular, I think it has been helpful just to understand kind of, I guess, from two perspectives. One, one traffic calming element that we're talking about with that street as an example is sort of necking down the entrance a bit to create more of a gateway. And a lot of people referenced the traffic sign that has been posted there, which in effect is kind of doing the same thing on the interim. So it's sort of given them this test case to use as an example of what they may expect. With that, there are differing opinions on how effective or appropriate it is at that location. But we'll keep working on that with the neighborhood. But I think overall, I would say the most common feedback that we've gotten from the various neighborhoods that have the local traffic designations, and it's not a large volume by any means, but I'd say people feel like it's been moderately helpful, that a lot of cars are still just ignoring the signs. So I think that's just a good indication that the importance of street design, basically, like we do need to do more than just post the signs. That isn't enough to change behaviors.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. It'd be sad to see a lot of those removed, and I agree that it was maybe early on when it was new, it had a more anecdotally there was perhaps more adherence to that, and then quickly, and it's also not a coincidence that sort of activity levels in town have risen since that program went into place. But yeah, those signs tend to be sort of finding their way closer to the curve or tipped over a little more frequently these days. But yeah, I would love to see us, and one takeaway from that may also be that, as you're saying, that the design suggests something more substantial than a sign, that something that actually needs to be steered around, bigger buckets or something for next spring, perhaps. Anyway, another thing, I would just emphasize that we're, aiming to address the cause of the symptoms here, and not necessarily just the, even if it's not addressed in the precise way that may be requested from the neighborhood. Like if I go off and say, like, I want speed bumps on my street or something, that, we're really asking, why is it that I feel that speed bumps are unhelpful here? And that maybe in this toolkit, you're sort of, you have a nice presentation of the options, be like, well, actually, speed bumps have these other problems. It's going to be noisy when the plow hits it every night, but you might consider this necking down or other options. And I'll see sort of a comment. I'm sure we'll get with Mr. Goulding and regards to transparently communicating sort of where things are in this data-driven process along the way. And just sort of a question on feedback. There were some changes recently with on Locust Street, a completion of a couple nice projects that narrowed crossings for pedestrians and things. And I noticed shortly thereafter there were some loop detectors out on the road. I've been meaning to follow up with our engineering staff to see what what the outcome of that. But it sort of makes me think: is that sort of play a role here? And that was at this point for that street, that was concrete curves, but I feel like maybe there's a role for measurement as well, as we take some quick build approaches here, measures that moving things in the right direction. Is it moving things enough? Or maybe even with Locust, after some concrete for new curbs go down, or measuring things, like, is that having the intended effect? Anyways, yeah, that's all I've got. I will open it up for public comment at this time.
Chairman, I'm going to recognize Jonathan Weber, who's got their hand raised. I'm going to allow you to speak momentarily.
All right, Mr. Weber.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, again, thank you.
Jonathan here from Local Motion. Along with what the rest of the commissioners are saying, I really applaud DPW's effort to update its manual, and especially I support the move away from the neighborhood petition requirement and the shift towards more of a needs-based selection process. I also really appreciate the explicit effort to move towards self-enforcing design, or at least just the explicit discussion of that in the manual. The one sticking point I have here, and I was discussing this a little bit with Nicole earlier, has to do with the speed threshold. Since most residential streets in Burlington have not had many crashes and few have truck traffic, speed will probably be the deciding factor in most cases as to whether or not a neighborhood receives traffic calming. The threshold, as written in the manual, uses an 85th percentile measurement to determine whether or not there is a speeding problem. My understanding is that this means that if 8.5 out of 10 cars travel at or below the posted speed, the neighborhood will not qualify for traffic calming based on that speed criteria alone. It could still qualify based on the other ones, but the problem here is that many, if not most, of the neighborhoods in Burlington fall under the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit, or maybe in rare circumstances, some have a 20-mile-per-hour posted speed. But personally, I feel that 20 miles per hour is still too fast for a residential street. I don't go over 15 usually on my street, and often I go slower. So I think that, that's a pretty high limit to set, given the sort of vibrant public life that I think we aspire to in our neighborhoods. So I could see this as something that's frustrating to residents who hear that traffic moving at 25 is deemed safe. I understand there are issues with implementing lower speed limits, just given state regulations. So my recommendation is to base the threshold on target design speed rather than limiting that criteria to the posted speed, which again, I think is quite high for neighborhoods. So thanks again for working on this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Weber.
That's it at this time that signed up for public comment.
All right, great, thank you. There is no action requested on this item. Taking a pass through, any final thoughts from commissioners on this? All right.
I would
Seeing-
say, I would just want to
Yeah,
add,
please.
I agree with the former speaker that speed is really a problem, and maybe that value could be reassessed. And it's my understanding that we're stuck with the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit in Burlington, so we can't really easily get less than that. So maybe that is another way that we can adjust it in that document to address the fact that we want it to be a little bit slower if possible.
Thank you.
We have been discussing that internally, and based on the public comment tonight and your feedback, we can revisit that conversation.
Okay, thank you, Director Spencer. Any other thoughts from the commission before we wrap this up? All right, closing out the traffic calming agenda item 8. Thanks so much, Nicole, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, and moving on to item 9, approval of draft minutes from the July meeting. Does somebody have the technology to share the minutes that we're looking at? I think I have one.
I can pull that up if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. All right, thank you. So a number of us. Okay, I think we have a quorum to vote on these. Are there any modifications from the commission at this time? I guess I'll start with mine quick. Commissioner Bose had to leave early last time. I think that should be noted in the on the list of commissioners present there. If I'm not mistaken, somebody has to duck out significantly early, so I would modify that to Commissioner Bose left at, I'd written out 6:57. Correct me if I'm wrong there. I guess that was all I had for modifications. Any other comments on the minutes as they're posted here? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Barr. I make a motion to accept the minutes with your modification of Commissioner Bose's departure.
Thank you, Commissioner Barr.
I'll second that, Commissioner Archambault here.
Thank you, Commissioner Archambault. Is there any discussion around the motion? All right, let's go to a vote. All in favor of approval of the minutes from July, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, July minutes have passed. Thank you. Moving on to item 10, Director's Report.
Right. Thank you very much, Chair Hogan. So in the packet is a report that I want to draw your attention to a couple key items. The first one is the integrated plan for our water quality efforts. We are at a key spot, as this commission understands from a presentation, I believe in July, on our integrated water quality planning effort. We have a permit for stormwater, we have a permit for wastewater, and what we got EPA permission to do is to do a united planning process that seeks to make the best prioritized decisions about how we improve our lake water quality with phosphorus reduction and looking at a number of different strategies. And that outreach engagement process is underway now. We have 24 public meetings in parks and on streets to engage the populace. And you see in your packet the list of those opportunities. I encourage all commissioners to get out and meet with staff and provide your input and to tell your friends about it as well. We are considering next month's meeting having a focused effort to have the commission collectively try to balance the different strategies as we seek to determine the best mix of strategies, from wastewater plant improvements to our collection system improvements to green stormwater infrastructure, in non-structural programs such as leaf sweeping and other organic management efforts in our rights of way, as we really seek to best steward our water resources. So do get engaged in that, and more to come. University Place design update. Thanks to the City Council and UVM leadership agreeing in 2008 to a framework for UVM's contributions to our sustainable infrastructure plan, which has helped us fund our increased sidewalk and paving programs. We agreed to embark on a process to look at overhauling University Place. And we are right now in the midst of a public engagement process around a couple of alternatives. There's a link to those alternatives in my director's report. And we will be coming to you next month seeking your input on either a base design or an enhanced design for that corridor. We very much look forward to your engagement and just wanted you to be alerted to that process. We are continuing to work on the parking enforcement transition. At this point, we're planning on switching over the administration of parking enforcement from the police to DPW, probably around the beginning of the calendar year this winter. But that any relocation of space or offices or a broader restructuring of staff would be a second phase that would happen after that. We are considering a marketplace garage pilot. With our success with Park Mobile payments on street, and looking at ways to innovate in our garage. We are considering treating our garage or piloting an effort to treat our garage much like the on-street system, and to have kiosks in the garage for those who do not have smartphones, and those who have smartphones could pay by Park Mobile. We're going to give that a try in October, likely. We're still working that out, but I wanted to notify the commission of that. One of the benefits would be that the gates would be up and we would not have congestion at our entrances of our garages, as they would not need to stop and get tickets. I think the other updates there speak for themselves, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or under commissioner updates.
Thank you, Director Spencer. Yeah, with that, I guess the immediate next agenda item is Commissioner Communications. So I'll leave it to that for people who have particular comments in response to that. So moving on, agenda item number 11, Commissioner Communications. Start in the middle here. Commissioner Bose.
I've got nothing. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Bose. Commissioner O'Neill.
I almost have nothing. No. No. I'm excited by the commission report. I can't wait for City Hall Park to open. I think the adjustment to the parking with Park Mobile, I think, is a really good idea. Let's see. And I guess just, I'm going to say it again, let's keep equity really at the top of our list as we move forward on our projects. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Commissioner Overby.
I have a few quick questions first for on the director's report. I appreciate your putting all those languages on the notice that of the integrated water plan meetings. It's great for people to see all those various languages that we have available in the community. So that was really nice. I was impressed to see that. I just wanted to ask, is on the Marketplace Garage pilot, is that sort of like the Winooski garage kind of design? Do you know the way the Winooski parking garage works there in the center of Winooski? They have I think they have a kiosk method.
Right. I believe it is similar. The Winooski garage, I believe, also has a restricted area for leases.
But for the public parking, so do you put you use the license plate in the kiosk, or do you use, and you leave the tag in your window, or what?
It would be the license plate in the kiosk, and you would not need to go back to your car to put the slip of paper in. We would be searching the online database for license plates that have active stays to determine compliance.
And I have a question related to that the license plate data and it being held by the private company Park Mobile. Now, do you have any sense of, it's sort of personally identifiable information? Have you had any conversations about the privacy issues with using license plates for parking purposes?
I can certainly follow up. I know, I recall us working through that when we were working through the contract documents with these companies. I don't know entirely where we landed with Park Mobile. Happy to follow up with Jeff Paget and get a response to you.
Yeah, I'd like to know what protections there are in place for that, because it is a privacy issue that I'm curious as to how that's been worked out. So you can get back to me on that one. I wanted to ask you quickly about, and this is not on your report, so maybe it should be in the Commissioner Communications, but how's the water tower repainting process going?
Yes, it's actively underway. It did have some delays this summer around the lead paint compliance work of the vendor. And so we made sure to delay the project until there was full compliance and the project could proceed accordingly. So they are underway, and the tank is currently drained and the work is underway.
Okay, sounds good. I haven't gone by there to see the flapping, the covering that they have on there. Do you have any update on the wastewater pipe repair that you guys did on Flynn Avenue? That was probably an exciting project.
You're talking about just this Sunday when we had a force crack in the force main that was repaired?
Yeah. How big is that pipe?
Yeah, it's only a 4-inch force main. It's not a big pipe, but thanks to your support in previous votes, part of the Clean Water Resiliency Plan has us upgrading the Flynn Avenue pump station and the Fletcher Place pump station, the two kind of oldest and deteriorated pump stations. And as part of that, we're also looking at relining and or replacing key sections of the force mains leading from those pump stations. We've had a number of breaks along the Flynn Ave force main. This last one on Sunday was a small crack, and there were no waters discharged to water bodies of the state. And the crew worked Sunday evening to get it done during the midst of the rainstorm.
That's good news. I want to say I've walked around a lot and noticed a lot of the new sidewalks, and they've done just a great job with the sidewalks. So I'm really impressed at how that project is going, including some very challenging ones where have to reroute around trees, like on Union Street, South Union. So I want to congratulate your guys on that work. They're doing a really great job. The more you walk around, the more you see wonderful work with the sidewalks and in sections, not just front long stretches. I know I had asked you about the signage with the stop signs with the little warning sign underneath, about what the penalty is if you don't stop. Is that something that you were able to come up with any kind of, like, how would Burlington do something like that if they wanted to do that in selected stop signs?
Right. Yes, we're still evaluating that. We have a number of folks looking at that right now. We haven't gotten a picture yet of the Shelburne example that you suggested we get. We have a picture of the Winooski fine sign, and we will evaluate your suggestion about some sort of friendly educational sign regarding the fines related to failure to stop.
For the other commissioners, I'm sure you've probably maybe seen those little sign underneath the stop sign that in Shelburne it says, stops are free, but if you want to do a rolling stop, it's $160. And it's a funny way to say that's what you're going to get a ticket for if you go through the stop sign. And I know there's some stop signs in the Old North End where people do tend to go through, and it's not like you can have a police officer sitting there all the time. So I think that's a great way to educate people. And then if they get a ticket, well, they've got it. They've been warned. I had a question about have you noticed any big change in the on-street meter parking revenue? It seems like there's just a lot of less people parking, and it doesn't seem like. I'm just worried. I was wondering. I don't know. Maybe that's not a number that you have off the top of your head, but have we really seen a drop in the on-street meter parking revenue that we have this going on?
Your observations are good, Commissioner Overby. Traffic has been slow to return to our downtown. We are seeing revenues substantially off our budget. We're monitoring this very closely, and in the coming weeks, we will be determining whether there are kind of initial actions we need to be taking as we approach the winter, which is usually our slower period here. We often make more of our money in the summer and fall, with downtown being super vibrant this time of year. We're doing what we can to work with the local businesses downtown around our street seats program and our grab and go short-term parking spaces, try to help the businesses in the downtown. But the pandemic is still impacting business significantly, and that's having a financial consequence both on our traffic fund and our parking facilities fund.
Yeah, well, it sort of seemed obvious that there's just hardly any people downtown parking. And the last thing, I know this is related to the one of the meetings we had where we elected officers, and I was asked to be the clerk secretary, but I haven't really had any idea what I'm supposed to do, and if in fact we're dispensing with that role, or if there's something I am supposed to be doing. And I know that the minutes, whoever did the minutes has been doing a great job. Nothing I could live up to. So I just want to have some clarification at some point about what that role is, and if in fact, there is a value in having anybody in that position, because I'm not doing anything. So if you want to maybe work with me later about that, that would be helpful. Or maybe Chair Hogan, maybe you have an idea of what you had wanted and expected from the secretary, when in the past the secretary treasurer did, or the secretary clerk did something, but not anything I've been told what to do. So
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Commissioner Archambault.
Thank you very much. Just making sure you can hear me okay, because I'm not sure if you can see me or not. Oh, I got my cover on. That would do it.
Gotcha. We can hear you and see you.
There we go. Question: what's the status of 1 Intervale Ave at the corner of Intervale Ave and Elmwood, where we had significant parking changes that we approved last November?
That is a good question. I believe you asked me that last month, Commissioner Archambault, and I don't believe I have an update for you. So I need to get back to you. I know the striping has been done. Is there is the issue that people are not complying with the striping? Help me understand, and I'm happy to follow up.
I mean, so we approved there was to be signage within what's called a green belt there. There's nothing green about it. It's paved.
No, the asphalt.
Yeah, and the signage was meant to effectively block people from parking on that green belt, again, that little weird zone. And so there's no signage there. People are still parking in that green belt, very, very close to the sidewalk. It's creating a hazard for cars that are double parking, people walking between those cars, and even across the street. It's a mess still.
Okay.
And the spaces that have been striped, if that's what you're referencing, are too wide. Whoever painted those did not measure appropriately. And I've actually measured it out compared to the average space downtown, and it's probably another 4 feet wider than it needs to be. And so it takes up more road space than it needs to, creates a special hazard to try to bike by that section, especially with all that movement that's occurring at one time, and those extra wide spaces where users now effectively have half a street to park in because it's been incorrectly measured.
It's good to have
that's
specific guidance, and we will follow up on that, and I will get back to you in between meetings.
Okay. My larger question is, how do we set expectations with, I'll just say, projects like that in light of the obvious changes that your department has had to encounter, which is the pandemic?
Yeah, I think we just need to have straightforward communication. There are requests like that, Commissioner Archambault, that we should be able to move on relatively quickly because it is a fairly straightforward installation. We are in a more difficult situation in having very few seasonals and interns in tech services to work through some of our more complicated and technical evaluations. So that's where we have been a little slow on traffic requests. You may have noticed fewer traffic requests last couple months. And we appreciate your consideration there. But if there's a project that's not moving, please let me know, and we can talk through what your expectations should be.
I think that's my fear, actually, that there's a host of items that we've approved, of course, especially pre-pandemic, and with a certain expectation. And again, I think we're not inflexible. We understand what's going on, but we're just kind of wondering, how do we set expectations? So, I'll just use 1 Intervale Ave because it's the one I kind of brought up and it's close to my house. But so all sorts of work went into leading up to the vote, which was last November, which means a year ago this month, people were actively engaged and feeling as though progress was right around the corner. So now a year has passed and nothing has changed. Now, if I'm a business at that location, I might be concerned that what happened to all that work we just did? I even heard that the commission approved it. where do we stand with that? So that's where I'm coming from on an expectation level. Again, I'm extremely sympathetic. Trust me when I say that. And we have to be clear on how quickly we can respond to these types of requests.
Understood. We can reach out directly to those businesses and explain what's coming. I thank you for your understanding and also just the need to be clearly communicating with what we can do and what we can't.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And that is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Archibald. Commissioner Barr.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I want to echo that I'm really looking forward to City Hall Park. So I've been biking by and seeing the progress and waiting for things to open up officially. So I'll be down there when it happens. I also want to give kudos for the bike lanes on Colchester Avenue, the repainting. I want to also notice, and I don't know that it's any of you doing this, but some vigilante is going out there and adding like pigtails to the bike helmet or a backpack on one. It's kind of cool, but I don't know if it's okay to do that. And city engineer Baldwin just left, so I'm sure he might not be listening to that. Also want to give kudos to the Chase Street, Colchester Avenue intersection. And I sent a message to Nicole Losch as well, since she was one of the leaders for that. Very excited about that. I'm not sure if there's going to be a planter also put there. I can't recall. But the paint is on the ground and the intersection is done correctly as far as crosswalks, but without some physical obstacle, cars are still kind of coming around that corner pretty quick. But it's a start. I'm excited about that. Now, the last thing I have is I've heard from several neighbors, and there's been a lot of line painting and getting stuff done in the city, and it looks great. It's all fresh paint and it's nice. But if you haven't heard already, the center line on Grove Street is a little skew. It's probably, if there were no cars there, right down the middle, but with one side having cars parked on it, there's no way that anybody traveling north is going to be able to stay to the right of that double yellow line. So, and I've heard several neighbors that have said, made comments about it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So just wanted to throw that out. But other than that, I really appreciate through with COVID, all the progress that DPW has had in the city. So thank you so much.
We will follow up.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Barr. I think that's everyone except for myself. One question, Director Spencer, can you give us an update where we're at on the goals for this current year, FY21?
Yes, my apologies. I'm going to share my screen. I did forget in my director's report that, let me see if I can. Here we go. We have worked to update our annual goals and objectives for our department. Back when Chair Archambault and I worked together, the commission felt that this was an important document for evaluating the performance of the director and the city engineer each year. So we have put together an updated FY21 goals and objectives for you. We just got it put together today. Apologies, it will be posted tomorrow. I will send it out to you all directly via email, and then we can discuss it in detail next month if that's friendly to the commission.
That sounds good to me. Thank you. All right, yeah, no, we'll look forward to that. I guess two logistical items with that as we get that communication, sort of reminder to myself and all of us to not be engaging electronically with us as a group until we meet again in public session with a Warren's agenda. So if there's, I don't know, if we need to like BCC each other on specific communications in the meantime, so let's do that. I will also say I was kicking myself last minute today, looking over the minutes from last time around, and I had a change, and I was reminded of something we spoke about a few months ago, that, as we all know, to comply with open meeting law, the minutes are posted within a few days of the meeting. And we have, that stretch of time, not just from when the agenda comes out, Thursday or Friday before our meeting, to sync up and get in any wording changes or any corrections there. So again, a reminder to myself and also the commission that we can submit changes to the minutes to be version tracked for all of our review going forward. Hopefully that would help that agenda item go efficiently in the future. A couple of things on my mind you may want to revisit in the coming months. I'm interested in the winter maintenance season that will be coming up on us shortly here. I know last year there was a delegation to Montreal to take some notes on some lesson learned that include some of our elected officials and some DPW staff there. And I'm curious, perhaps in another meeting, if there's anything we need to link up on that, as with an eye on this coming winter season. If there's any changes or anything we want to try and sneak an ordinance, or just our priorities in things. My last scribbled note I can't read, so I'll close with saying that we're very excited about. Well, there's a lot of exciting changes going on around the city. One in particular, my neighborhood here is I think approaching a conclusion this week at the 5 corners of Howard, St. Paul, and Winooski. And I'm sort of reflecting back on that as a years-long process as well. And there was a sort of a pop-up shortening of pedestrian crossing distances, and then a quick build type thing last year. And along the way, there was a conversation in consideration of roundabouts there. And then there was certainly some interest in pursuing that. And, there's certainly engineering challenges with the grades there and so forth. And going into that before, in my head, I was like, oh, of course, yeah, roundabout would be sweet there. So get rid of the light and just, keep the traffic speeds manageable and everything. And, I recall, as there are in many places, very practical or sort of pragmatic concerns that buildings would need to be bought out on the corner, and the buildings with local businesses there that are loved and frequented by the neighborhood. And so when I look at this stuff in whole, I'm like, yes, I'm so glad those neighborhood businesses are still there. I'll take the modifications that we got. I'm excited about them. Signalized intersections or no, but we glad to see that stuff moving forward. So I just appreciate and applaud again. I think the work that the staff is doing in a lot of different areas here. I realize it's a challenging year. All of these years seem to be demanding on DPW staff. This year, he's really distinguished himself with those challenges. But anyways, my kudos to the staff for all that they're managing with many constraints.
We'll pass that on. Thank you.
With that, I will close out agenda item 11. Brings us to item 12, adjournment and next meeting date, October 21.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, please. Commissioner Archambault here.
Thank you, Commissioner Archambault. Seconded, was that Commissioner Barr? The second?
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Can I make
You
a
do it,
comment?
Jim.
I waited.
Comment.
I waited.
I don't want to just quite this second. I didn't notice on my phone that there were several people that had tried to get in by Zoom and were unable to do that. So my thought is there a way that, I know there were some people that said they were going to speak tonight and they clearly were unable to get in somehow. And what I wanted to suggest is there a way in the little boxes where we're seeing now DPW, Communic, is there a way that we could actually put on the screen the contact information if you are having difficulty getting in on the Zoom connection. And I don't know if that's technically possible that you could have in the place of a, where it just says DPW, it's a portion of the connection. But I think we really need to make a better effort, because if the people didn't get to write down the name of, get Rob Goulding's email or something, there were people that I think are not going to be happy that they couldn't get in. And we tried, valiantly to get them a way to participate. But if there's a way to do it technically in Zoom so that what we're displaying is contact information if you're having a difficulty, so that in, YouTube you can see it or we can see it, I think that would be an improvement.
Commissioner Overby, yeah, I can look into, instead of you seeing DPW communications, having an avatar kind of style thing up with the contact information to call in, which we confirmed the call-in number was working tonight. I did reach out to 2 of those residents directly, but we can have the call-in number. We can offer people the link to YouTube just in case they only wanted to watch it, and certainly also have the email address up if they were willing to just send their comment in as one of the public commenters did tonight for us to read it. I agree the challenges we had for a very small subset of the public was unfortunate, and I'm going to continue to troubleshoot that to make sure we know what happened and how to avoid that for next time.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking it might happen again, and to improve the odds that people have all those alternatives right in front of them, and reduce the frustration level, so we don't have people who are going to complain and say I was disenfranchised and participating. I would like to make it easier in the future. So we acknowledge there was a problem tonight, and we also make it. We have a proposed solution. Thank you for figuring out some way to do that. And I think that's great. Any of those, the phone number for call in, who to call if you're just really struggling to get the Zoom thing to work. If there was something wrong with something in the Zoom link, I don't know. But
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Commissioner Overby.
Now we can have a vote on the adjournment.
Are there any other comments on the motion here? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. With that, we are adjourned at 9:36. Thank you so much, all. We'll see you October 21.